Hi there, I'm Hannah. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down my floral maternity dress. My baby bump was clearly showing, a constant reminder of the new life growing inside me. Today was supposed to be a happy day, my baby shower, but as I looked at my reflection, I couldn't shake off a feeling of worry deep in my stomach. Hey, you ready? The guests will be here soon, Mark called from downstairs. I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and made my way down. Mark was busy in the living room, setting up chairs and hanging the last decorations. He gave me that charming smile, the one that made me fall in love with him years ago, but lately, it felt distant. You look beautiful, he said, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek before going back to his tasks. I wanted to stop him, to make him really look at me, and ask why he seemed so distracted lately, but I held back. Today was about celebrating our baby, not bringing up our issues. The doorbell rang, and Claire burst in, arms full of gifts and decorations. Hannah, you look amazing. You're glowing, she exclaimed, giving me a warm hug. I relaxed, grateful for her support. Thanks for coming early to help set up, I said as we started arranging snacks and games. Claire lowered her voice. How are things with Mark? I glanced at my husband, who was now fiddling with the sound system. Fine, I lied. He's just busy with work, you know. Claire narrowed her eyes, but didn't press further. I knew she could tell something was off, but I wasn't ready to talk about it. Not today. More guests started arriving, and soon our home was filled with chatter and laughter. I played the part of the happy mom-to-be, accepting congratulations and admiring baby clothes and stuffed animals. But I kept glancing at Mark, who seemed more interested in his phone than the party. Well, if it isn't my little girl all grown up, a familiar, gruff voice said. I turned to see my dad, David, walking in with a huge gift box. Dad, you made it. I said, giving him a hug. He awkwardly patted my back. Wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetie. Now, where's that son-in-law of mine? I cringed a little inside. Dad never fully approved of Mark, and their conversations were always tense. He's over there, Dad. Please, be nice, I said. Dad grunted and walked over to Mark. I watched nervously as they exchanged stiff handshakes and forced smiles. Claire appeared beside me, handing me a glass of sparkling cider. Your dad's still giving Mark a hard time, huh? I sighed. Some things never change. I just wish they'd get along, you know? For the baby's sake, if nothing else. Speaking of the baby, Claire said, her tone shifting, have you and Mark talked about your financial situation? I felt my face flush. Our growing debts had been a constant source of stress, especially with Mark's recent pay cut. We're working on it, I mumbled. Claire gave my arm a sympathetic squeeze. You know I'm here if you need anything, right? I nodded, grateful for her friendship, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was holding something back. Before I could ask, Mark's voice cut through the chatter. All right, everyone. Time for some baby shower games. As I watched my friends and family gather around, laughing and chatting, a mix of emotions washed over me, joy for the baby I was bringing into the world, anxiety about our uncertain future, and a deep longing for the closeness Mark and I used to share. I placed a hand on my belly and felt a soft kick. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew one thing for sure, I would love this baby with all my heart. Maybe, just maybe, this new life would bring Mark and me closer again. Little did I know, the baby shower was just the beginning of a journey that would test everything, my relationships, my marriage, and even my own identity. The room buzzed with laughter and conversation as we moved on to the gift opening. I sat in a chair decorated with pastel ribbons, surrounded by presents. I felt both excited and uneasy. Mark stood beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder, but his eyes kept drifting to his phone. All right, everyone. Gather round, my dad's booming voice cut through the noise. It's time for a toast to the parents-to-be. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Dad had that look in his eye, the one that always meant trouble. He raised his glass, and the room fell silent. To my beautiful daughter, Hannah, he began, his voice filled with emotion. I've watched you grow into an amazing woman, and I know you'll be an incredible mother. I felt a bit comforted by my dad's kind words, but then his tone changed, turning cold as he looked at Mark. "And to my son-in-law, Mark," he began. "I had such high hopes for you. I trusted you with my daughter's heart." The room grew tense. My heart started racing, and I gripped the arms of my chair. "But it seems I was wrong about you," Dad continued, his voice full of anger. "You see, folks, our Mark here hasn't been busy with work like he's been saying. He's been busy with another woman." Gasps filled the room. I felt all the blood drain from my face. I turned to look at Mark, who had gone pale, his eyes wide with guilt and shock. "Dad, what are you talking about?" I managed to say, my voice shaking. But my dad wasn't done. With a dramatic gesture, he pulled out a stack of papers from his jacket. "I have proof," he said. "Text messages, photos, hotel receipts, all right here for everyone to see." He began handing out copies to the stunned guests. I watched in horror as my friends and family read the private details of my husband's supposed betrayal. "How could you?" I whispered to Mark, tears filling my eyes. Mark stammered, "Hannah, it's not what it looks like." "I can explain." But his words felt empty. I looked around the room and saw pity and shock on everyone's faces. Then I noticed Claire, and my heart sank even further. She wouldn't meet my eyes, her face full of guilt and conflict. Had she known all along? "Get out," I whispered to Mark, barely able to speak. "Hannah, please," he begged. I said, "Get out," I shouted, surprising even myself with the anger in my voice. Mark slunk out of the room, and murmurs of shock and sympathy filled the air. My mother rushed to my side, trying to comfort me, but I shrugged her off. I turned on my father, fury replacing my shock. "How could you do this? How dare you turn my baby shower into a spectacle like this?" Dad looked surprised. "Sweetie, I did this for you. You deserve to know the truth." "The truth?" I laughed bitterly. "The truth is, you've always hated Mark. You've been waiting for the perfect moment to ruin everything." "Hannah, that's not fair," Claire finally spoke up. "Your dad was just trying to protect you." I rounded on her. "And you? Did you know about this? Is that why you've been acting so strange lately?" Claire's silence said it all. I felt another wave of betrayal wash over me. "Everyone, please leave," I said, my voice shaking. "The party's over." As the guests slowly filed out, murmuring apologies and offering support, I sat alone in the chair, surrounded by half-opened gifts and the scattered evidence of my shattered life. My father approached, his face a mix of concern and defiance. "Hannah, I know you're upset, but don't." I cut him off. "Just don't, Dad, you've done enough." Left alone in the aftermath of the chaos, I placed a hand on my swollen belly. My baby kicked, almost as if sensing the turmoil. "It's just you and me now, little one," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "What are we going to do?" As reality set in, a flood of emotions overwhelmed me. Anger at Mark for his betrayal, fury at my dad for humiliating me in front of everyone, disappointment in Claire for keeping secrets, and a deep sense of loneliness. But beneath all the pain, there was something else, a small flicker of relief. I made a decision. I wouldn't let this destroy me. For my baby's sake and for myself, I would find a way through this mess. Little did I know, the revelations of that day were just the beginning. The coming weeks would challenge me in ways I never imagined, forcing me to face hard truths about my relationships, my marriage, and even myself. The days after the baby shower blurred together in a fog of tears and sleepless nights. I shut myself off, ignoring calls and messages from concerned friends and family. The only comfort I had was the constant movement of my baby, a reminder that I had to keep going, no matter how broken I felt. One afternoon, as I sat on the couch, I heard voices drifting through the open window. It was Claire, talking quietly to someone outside. I should have told her sooner. I heard Claire's voice tremble. "I saw Mark with that woman weeks ago. I just didn't want to be the one to break her heart." My own heart clenched. Even my best friend had betrayed me. I wanted to scream, to confront her, but I was too numb, too exhausted by the constant wave of betrayals. Days turned into weeks, and I knew I couldn't hide forever, especially with a baby on the way. I needed to face reality, so I called Mark. He arrived looking worn out, dark circles under his eyes. As soon as he saw me, he broke down. "Hannah, I'm so sorry," he sobbed. "I made a terrible mistake. I never meant to hurt you." I listened as he poured out his regrets, explaining how he felt stressed and unappreciated, but his words felt empty. Nothing he said could take away the pain he had caused. I want to try and fix this, Mark pleaded. For us, for the baby, we could go to counseling. I nodded, not because I forgave him, but because I felt we needed to try, at least for the sake of our child. As we talked, Mark's phone kept buzzing. He tried to ignore it, but I could see the worry in his eyes. What's going on, Mark? I asked, suddenly on edge. Is there something else you're hiding? He hesitated before sighing. It's work. There's a deal I've been working on. It was supposed to be a big break for us, but things have gone wrong. We might be in some financial trouble. Another blow, another secret. It felt like my world was falling apart again. Get out, I said quietly. I need time to think. As Mark left, I felt a swirl of emotions, anger, but also a growing sense of resolve. I couldn't live like this anymore, surrounded by lies. The next day, I called my father. The conversation was tense, filled with long silences. I thought I was protecting you, he finally said. I couldn't stand seeing that man hurt you. But you hurt me too, Dad, I replied, my voice shaking. You took away my choice. You humiliated me in front of everyone. He didn't have an answer for that. As we ended the call, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had finally spoken my truth, and now I could begin to heal. Hannah's journey through betrayal and self-discovery has come to an end, but now we turn to you. If you were in Hannah's position, would you give your marriage another chance after such a public betrayal, or would you walk away? Consider her situation, a baby on the way, financial troubles, and the involvement of family and friends. What would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective could help others in similar situations. If you found Hannah's story compelling, please like this video. It helps us reach more people who may benefit from these discussions. And if you want more content exploring relationships and personal growth, hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything to us and helps our channel grow. Remember, every view, like, and comment helps build a community where we can openly talk about life's toughest moments. Thank you for being part of this conversation.
Maria, I'm sorry, but could you go grocery shopping for dinner instead of me? I'll write down the necessary ingredients. Having just been discharged from the hospital and not feeling completely well, I asked my daughter-in-law Maria, who lives with us. Then Maria, whether she was listening to me or not, noticed the paper bag placed next to the table. What's this? It's almost Henry's birthday, isn't it? I thought I'd give this to him as a present. My eldest grandson Henry loves superhero shows and had wanted the combining robot that appears in the show for a while. Imagining Henry's delighted face, I suddenly wanted to see him, so I reached for my laptop. A while later, as I was laughing and engrossed in the laptop screen, "Is this a jab at me for not having children?" She said that and kicked the box with the combining robot in the paper bag with all her might. The box, following gravity, crashed to the floor with a loud noise. "How could you do that? He's your adorable nephew too, isn't he?" Henry's mother is Maria's biological sister. At that moment, I felt pain around my stomach and grimaced. Suddenly feeling a lot of stress might have affected my recently operated stomach. The doctor had told me to rest for 2 weeks after being discharged, but while I was away, the house had been overflowing with garbage and laundry, and I had just finished tidying up. Holding my stomach with one hand and using the other to support myself on the wall or table, I tried to sit on the sofa. "Don't sit down. Do the piled-up housework. That's the only reason you're in this house." Maria, instead of helping me, stretched out both legs on the sofa to prevent me from sitting down. My name is Jane, a housewife in her 70s. My husband Tom has been a local police officer for many years, and even after retirement, he trains new recruits. Tom and I have 2 sons, both of whom are over 30 and married. My eldest son David has been serious since childhood, similar to his father. He left our hometown to attend university and got a job at a company in Boston after graduating. He is an elite who excels at his job but doesn't neglect family time, bringing a bouquet home for his wife Karen's birthday every year. They have a daughter and a son in elementary school. Since there is a distance between my hometown and Boston, it's difficult for the busy David and his family to visit frequently, but now it's a convenient era with video calls. Recently, I find myself talking more with Karen than with David, and before I know it, we chat for 2 or 3 hours. My other son, Sam, married a woman named Maria about 6 months after David's wedding. Maria is actually Karen's biological sister. Sam fell in love with Maria at first sight when she was sitting on the groom's side at David and Karen's wedding. Sam has been timid since childhood, unable to approach girls he liked in class. Even as an adult, this didn't change, and though he was interested in Maria, he would only look at her from a distance at family gatherings, hardly exchanging words. The first person to notice Sam's behavior was Karen, my eldest daughter-in-law, who teased him. "Sam, do you have something you want to say to Maria?" Sam's face turned bright red, and in a burst of courage, he confessed, "I like you, Maria. Please go out with me with marriage in mind." He confessed in front of all the relatives watching, causing a huge commotion among everyone present. After thinking for a while, Maria smiled and nodded. "Yes, I'd love to." Sam and Maria's marriage was decided immediately. Afterward, Sam and Maria started living with us at our home. I can never forget the shock of Maria's first visit to our house. "Congratulations! You've passed. The house is clean, and Jane's cooking is good, so it's above average." Having hardly spoken with her before, I was surprised by such a sudden remark, but I could only force a smile, thinking it was her way of joking. Even after marrying Sam and starting to live with us, she didn't do any housework. Instead, she left all the chores, including cooking, laundry, cleaning, and grocery shopping, entirely to me, while she lay on the sofa watching TV. Seeing Maria lounging and munching on snacks, I couldn't help but be amazed. "If you don't move around, you'll put on extra weight," I cautioned her jokingly. Most people would take that as a hint to help out, but unfortunately, not Maria. Suddenly, she stood up, grabbed a branded bag, put on flashy makeup, and stormed out of the house, not returning for a long time. Yet, as if timing it perfectly with Sam and Tom's return home, she would be back before nightfall. To everyone else in the family, it seemed like she was a diligent wife who did housework all day. I'm in my 70s now and don't know how much longer I'll live. I'm worried about how Sam and Maria will manage after I'm gone. Ideally, I want them to move out and live independently, so I hinted this to Maria. I'd like to do that too, but financially, it's difficult right now. Prices are high these days. She stared intently at me as she said that. Every time she said that, I could only nod and say, "Well, it can't be helped then." But thinking it over, Sam should have a stable income from his job at a local company. They should be able to manage a modest living on their own. My doubts about her didn't end there. Whenever I took my eyes off Maria for a moment, she was always on her smartphone, seemingly in contact with someone. She would show a smile that she never displayed to our family, but once she noticed my gaze, she would hurriedly move to another room. One time, while she was in the bath, her smartphone rang repeatedly. Out of curiosity, I glanced at the screen and saw the name Alex displayed. When Maria came out of the bathroom, I told her, "Someone named Alex called you several times." I meant it as a kind gesture, but Maria's face turned red with anger. "How dare you look at someone else's smartphone? That's the lowest!" she yelled furiously. "There's no need to get so angry. Do you have something to hide?" "Shut up! It's none of your business, Jane!" Lately, Maria had stopped being polite to me even in her language. When Sam came home, I subtly suggested he should talk to Maria, but timid Sam couldn't stand up to her. "Well, that's a bit..." He would just laugh it off. With Maria complaining a lot but doing nothing, I found myself sighing more and more. One day, as I was washing the lunch dishes, I felt a sharp pain in my abdomen. "Maria, I'm sorry, but could you take over? My stomach feels strange." I asked Maria, who was lying on the sofa, as I tried to rest. For about half a month, I had been experiencing occasional abdominal pain, but that day it felt particularly severe. What? Why should I do something so troublesome? Just buy a dishwasher. She refused to move, as usual. The pain intensified, making it hard to stand. Maria, can you call an ambulance? Something feels really wrong today. It's different from usual. Unable to bear it, I collapsed to the floor and pleaded. Maria, staring at her smartphone, exclaimed, "Oh my God! Really? Yes." She was excitedly distracted. "Sorry, Jane, I just got some urgent plans. Can you manage until next time?" She went to the bedroom to change clothes and then left for an outing, leaving me incapacitated on the floor. Fortunately, a neighbor happened to come by and noticed me, quickly calling an ambulance. At the hospital, I had to undergo emergency surgery. It's a very rare case, but excessive stress caused a stomach ulcer, which rapidly worsened, creating a perforation and bleeding. The surgery was successful, but the doctor said I would need to stay in the hospital for 3 weeks. Under the influence of anesthesia and feeling drowsy, I overheard my family's conversation during their visit. This happened while I was out shopping. If only I had noticed sooner, this wouldn't have happened. Maria was desperately apologizing in a tearful voice. Hearing this, Tom spoke kindly. "Don't blame yourself so much. Maria, you were just helping out with the shopping because Jane asked you to, right? You did nothing wrong." "That's right. Maria was doing her part. There's nothing to blame her for." Tom and Sam continued to comfort the crying Maria. In my mind, I kept repeating, "No, that's not true. It's all lies." But my voice couldn't reach my family. For about 3 weeks, I was hospitalized, and during that time, Maria never once came to visit me. On the day of my discharge, Tom took a break from work to come and pick me up in the car. "Don't overdo it. Jane, you're recovering now, and you're not as strong as before. The doctor said you need to rest for about 2 weeks even after you get home." I know. You don't have to keep reminding me. But thank you. I didn't realize you were so worried about me. Of course I worry. We're family. And it's not just me. Sam and Maria are worried about you too. Even David and Karen in Boston have been calling every day to check on you. The grandchildren are also praying for your speedy recovery. I was very happy to know that everyone was thinking of me so much, but I couldn't accept Maria's concern so easily. I didn't know what she had told Tom and Sam, but it seemed she had earned their complete trust. Just thinking about Maria made my stomach hurt again, and I winced. "What's wrong? Is it hurting again? Don't push yourself too hard. If anything happens, just let me know. I'll leave work and come running." I felt the urge to reveal her true nature, but I didn't want to worry Tom, who was being so kind, so I decided to keep it to myself. "Henry's birthday is coming up soon, isn't it? Did you get the robot he wanted?" Of course. There were similar toys lined up, so I was a bit confused at first. But when I showed the image to the store clerk, they explained it clearly. "The paper bag in the back seat, is it? Henry is the son of our eldest son and his wife, and he will soon be turning 7. I had heard from Karen that he wanted a combining robot from a superhero show. Tom dropped me off in front of our house and then headed to work. I entered our home for the first time in 3 weeks. The first thing that hit me was the smell of instant noodles. Dust had accumulated in the corners of the hallway. Sighing, I headed to the living room, and as I expected, Maria was sprawled on the sofa. The TV was so loud that she didn't immediately notice my return. "Oh, you're back already?" she said without even looking my way. I set the bag with the robot aside and went to the kitchen, where I saw a trash bag stuffed with instant noodle cups and deli containers. "Have you been eating this every day while I was gone? Did Tom and Sam eat this too?" "I've never cooked before. As long as our stomachs are full, it doesn't matter, right? And I did serve the deli food on plates for Tom and Sam. They probably didn't realize it was store-bought deli food. As long as they're full, it doesn't matter anyway. There were flies swarming around the garbage bag, so I immediately closed it and sprayed insecticide. Next, I went to the laundry room, where a pile of dirty laundry was emitting a foul odor. I loaded the washing machine several times, and while the laundry was being washed, I cleaned the floors. Years of habit kicked in, and as soon as I finished one task, I moved on to the next, ignoring the doctor's advice to rest for 2 weeks. I hung the laundry to dry and then planned to go shopping for dinner. Maybe it was because of the recent surgery or my age, but I noticed I was more out of breath than usual and felt a bit dizzy. Perhaps it was too soon to push myself. "Maria, I'm sorry, but could you go shopping for dinner in my place? I'll make a list of the necessary ingredients," I asked. Maria, seemingly oblivious to my request, noticed the paper bag on the table. "What's that?" "It's for Henry's upcoming birthday. I thought he'd like it," I replied, imagining Henry's delighted face and suddenly wanting to see him. I reached for my laptop. While I was laughing at something on the screen, Maria looked at the bag and sneered. "Is this a dig at me for not having children?" She then kicked the box containing the toy robot, sending it crashing to the floor with a loud thud. "How could you do that? Henry is your adorable nephew too!" I exclaimed, feeling a sharp pain in my stomach. The stress seemed to be affecting my freshly operated stomach. Holding my abdomen with one hand and using the other to brace against the wall and table, I tried to sit on the sofa. "Don't sit down! You're here to do housework. That's the only reason you're in this house." Maria not only refused to help me, but she also insulted me further and deliberately stretched out her legs on the sofa so that I couldn't sit down. With nothing left to lean on, my body suddenly felt heavier, and I couldn't support myself on my legs, collapsing onto the floor. Maria, without offering a hand, barely opened her eyes and said to me, "Hurry up and go shopping before it gets dark." Ignoring my distress, Maria seemed ready to fall asleep. At that moment, right next to Maria, "What do you think you're doing?" I heard a low female voice filled with a mix of surprise and anger saying. Maria and I were supposed to be alone, yet the voice was clear and unmistakable. "What? Whose voice was that?" Maria, startled, sat up and looked around in confusion. Maria eventually realized that the voice had come from the open laptop on the table. She stammered, "Karen," in a trembling voice, and then fell silent. While Maria was in the bathroom, I had been consulting with Karen over a video call about Henry's birthday. We were discussing the best time to give him his present, to ensure a delightful surprise. That's why the laptop was open. As Maria stared in shock at the screen, I could almost see right through her thoughts. She was wondering when the video call had started, and how much Karen had witnessed of her behavior towards me. To add to her panic, I said, "She saw everything. She knows what you've done." "No, that's not true. Karen, you didn't see anything, did you?" Maria's words were more a desperate plea than a confirmation. Maria's words were more a desperate plea than a confirmation. Karen's clear voice cut through the tension. "It's true. I saw everything she did from start to finish." Faced with this undeniable reality, Maria let out a scream and bolted for the front door. But standing there was an elderly couple. "I need to talk to you," shouted Ben, Maria's father, as he grabbed her arm and dragged her back inside. Next to him, Maria's mother, Rebecca, had a stern expression unlike her usual gentle demeanor. Rebecca rushed to me as I lay curled up in pain on the living room floor. "Ben, we need an ambulance, now," she cried. At that voice, Ben took out his smartphone to call for help, but before he could, a dependable voice came from the laptop. "That's not necessary. The ambulance is already on its way," said the ever-reliable Karen. "I'm fine. But why are you here?" I asked, surprised by their sudden arrival. "We came to celebrate your discharge from the hospital. Just before we arrived, Karen called us to say something was wrong, Rebecca explained. Thank you, Karen. You've been a great help, I said, grateful. That's fine. But what happened? Please tell my parents everything Maria did to you, Karen urged. I nodded slightly and turned my gaze to Maria, who remained silent in the corner of the living room. Actually, Maria, I began, recounting everything she had done to me. Is this true, Maria? Ben demanded, his fists clenched in anger. Maria! He shouted, glaring at her furiously. Tom returned home from work just then. What happened here? Tom, actually. Ben began, explaining everything that had occurred. Maria, terrified by the presence of Tom, a former police officer, attempted to flee the house again, but Tom's sharp command, "Don't move," froze her in place. It's all lies. Jane made it all up. She's trying to make me look like the bad guy to get everyone's sympathy. Maria desperately tried to defend herself, but her efforts were in vain. I recorded everything you did and said. There's no escaping it now, Karen said through the video call. Maria, realizing her defeat, sat down on the floor in resignation. Maria, how could you do such a terrible thing to Jane? You just left her suffering like that? What if something had happened to her? Tom demanded. I don't care what happens to Jane, Maria shouted. I was relieved when she got discharged and could manage the household again, but she seemed slower than before, and it frustrated me to watch. And then she tried to make me go grocery shopping for dinner. She was trying to take it easy while dumping all the troublesome tasks on me, so I got angry and kicked the toy lying around. Maria explained her motives, but no matter how hard I tried to understand her reasoning, I couldn't make sense of it. Utterly selfish, Tom muttered. Exactly. Jane did nothing wrong. It's all Maria's fault, Karen added, sighing. To think someone like this is part of my family, my own sister. I can't believe it, Karen continued, exasperated. Ben and Rebecca nodded in agreement. Ben and Rebecca then turned to me and apologized in unison. We are deeply sorry for the terrible actions of our daughter. We truly apologize. Ben, with a trembling voice, expressed his apologies, and Rebecca, her shoulders shaking, repeatedly said, I'm so sorry. It must have been really hard for you. In a comforting manner. You don't need to apologize so much. The pain has eased a bit now. Thank you for coming here for me today. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything to help, I said. At that moment, the sound of an ambulance siren finally reached us, and I was taken to the hospital again. Fortunately, there was no damage to the surgical site, but the doctor decided I should stay overnight for observation. Ben and Rebecca came to the hospital as well. We'll make sure Maria is thoroughly re-educated, Ben promised with a voice filled with a mix of anger and remorse. A few days later, I had fully recovered physically and was able to do household chores as before. Feeling mentally refreshed as well, I decided to reach out to Karen in Boston for the first time in a while. On the other side of the video call were Ben and Rebecca as well. I apologize for the terrible things Maria has done recently, they said, to which I replied with a smile. Please stop already. We promised before, but we are in the process of re-educating Maria. However, if we determine that there is no effect, we are considering divorce with Sam. What do you think? Ben said apologetically, and I nodded to Tom. If it comes to that, it can't be helped. Agreeing with their suggestion. In fact, we had already discussed it with Sam, and knowing Maria's true nature, I want to separate from Maria, he had clearly said. So, we would like to cover all the medical expenses. We will pay you later. Not at all. There's no need for that. Fortunately, the doctor said there was no issue with the surgical scar, so you really don't need to worry. But given the circumstances, even though there were no post-surgery issues, isn't it possible that leaving someone in pain could be a crime? Ben, looking worried, confirmed with Tom, who was a former police officer. Indeed, there is video evidence, and depending on the situation, it could potentially lead to criminal charges. However, Jane's injury was very minor, so there is no need for that. Tom gently smiled, and I quietly held his hand. If it became a criminal case, Ben and Rebecca would inevitably be involved in interviews and trials, causing them considerable stress. Tom wasn't protecting Maria, but was trying to handle things smoothly to avoid burdening the elderly Ben and Rebecca. However, Maria hadn't returned home even once since that day, showing no signs of remorse. "If Maria comes your way, please contact us anytime," Ben said angrily. A week later, Rebecca contacted me saying they had found Maria's whereabouts. After the previous video call, feeling responsible, Ben and Rebecca had hired a private investigator at their own expense to find Maria, who turned out to be living with her ex-boyfriend Alex. Moreover, their relationship had secretly continued even after Maria married Sam, with frequent hotel meetings. Sam wasn't particularly handsome, but he had a decent salary, so I married him, Maria reportedly said without any sign of regret after being brought back home. On the day I collapsed from a stomach ulcer, Maria had left me unattended to go to a concert of her favorite idol, invited by Alex, who had gotten a sudden ticket. Thinking that Sam and Maria's inability to leave home despite a stable income was due to Maria's excessive spending habits made everything clear. I could have endured it if it were just me, but I was furious that Maria had also deceived Sam. Maria has no hope for rehabilitation. There is no problem with getting a divorce, right? Ben confirmed again. There's no need to confirm, I said with a clear intention and nodded. A few months later, after much deliberation, Sam and Maria's divorce was officially finalized. Maria was ordered to pay a substantial amount of compensation to both Sam and me, but being unemployed, she couldn't afford it, so her parents had to cover the costs. According to Karen, Maria is now working at a lodge in a remote mountain area, slowly repaying the money her parents had advanced. When Alex found out about Maria's huge debt, he abandoned her easily and is now completely out of touch, but I don't care about that. With Maria gone, our home finally regained its peace and quiet. Sam doesn't seem to be dwelling on the divorce anymore, which is a relief to me. It was a good lesson. I'm really sorry for dragging you into this, Mom. Sam laughed off the painful past. Jane, it's Henry. Henry wants to talk to you. Tom, who has fully retired from his job with the police and is enjoying a leisurely retirement, is now completely absorbed in the grandchildren on the other side of the video call. Jane, thank you as always. The delicious vegetables you sent us this month were a big help. Next to him, the grandchildren were waving their hands with smiles. Look! This fusion robot is super cool, Henry said, clearly thrilled with the fusion robot he received for his birthday, which made me smile with joy. The fusion robot Maria had thrown had one arm and part of its back wings broken. Maria's parents offered to replace it with a new one, but Sam, after carefully examining the broken robot, said, "There's no need for that," and skillfully repaired it. The broken screw had an identical replacement, so I used that. The plastic wing was partially broken, but I fixed it with super glue. I think it looks fine. Sam, who was timid as a child, was oddly skilled at assembling and repairing radio-controlled cars and plastic models. I never imagined that this would come in handy when he grew up. Henry spends all his time playing with this toy after he gets home from school. Karen laughed, somewhat exasperated. Grandma, Grandpa, thank you so much. I'll treasure this fusion robot forever. We're so glad to hear that. But make sure you finish your homework before playing. I promise. Oh, and I won first place at the Sports Day event recently. That's wonderful, Henry. I wish I could have been there to see it. And so, Tom and I enjoyed another day of video calls with Karen and the grandchildren. Nothing. I'm fine, Mom. Don't worry about it, Crystal told me, Her face flushed a deep crimson. Crystal is in first grade and attends an after-school program when classes end for the day. On days when the program isn't running, we usually drop her off at her grandparents' house. But lately, something seems off with Crystal. Every time I go to pick her up, her face is bright red for some reason. When I ask her grandmother Barbara about it, she just says, "Oh, she was probably engrossed in a video game." And all Crystal will tell me is, "It's nothing." Concerns weighing on my mind, I brought the matter up with my husband Fred. But even when he casually tried to get answers from Barbara and Crystal, he got the same responses I did. Fred and I were worried about Crystal's well-being, but she always seemed so happy and carefree once she was back home. So we decided to just keep an eye on the situation for a while. Then the unthinkable happened. What? Crystal collapsed? I was at work, going about my day as usual, when I got a call from the elementary school. Crystal had collapsed and was being rushed to the hospital. I hurried to the hospital, meeting up with Fred, who had also rushed over. Together, we listened to what the doctor had to say. Thankfully, Crystal's condition wasn't life-threatening. Once she recovered, she would be able to come home. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The doctor's next words drained the color from both my and my husband's faces. Apparently, while being transported to the hospital, Crystal had been muttering something over and over in a delirious state. As soon as I finished hearing what the doctor had to say, I immediately called the person who came to mind and demanded answers. Crystal collapsed today and had to be rushed to the hospital. Can we talk about what happened? My name is Amy. I'm a 34-year-old accountant at a cosmetics company. I love my job, and my colleagues often refer to me as a career woman. Fred works in sales at the same company. We first met 10 years ago. We were introduced at a camping trip organized by a mutual friend from work. Being the same age, we hit it off right away. By the end of the day, we had exchanged numbers and started hanging out regularly, just the two of us. I was drawn to Fred's kind nature and how thoughtful he was. Eventually, I decided to take the initiative and ask him out. As it turned out, Fred had feelings for me too. He gladly accepted. I was planning on asking you out myself, but... Sorry for making you confess first, Amy. But I'm really happy. Here's to our future together. Seeing Fred grin sheepishly as he said that melted my heart. And so, we started dating. Before long, we had moved in together. Our relationship grew steadily, and after about a year of dating, we decided to get married. We agreed it was time to announce our engagement to our respective parents, starting with a family meeting at Fred's family home. Fred's parents' house is about a 30-minute drive from where we live. Fred's father had passed away from an illness about 5 years ago, so currently, Barbara lives there alone. On the day we went to visit, I was incredibly nervous. Fred smiled and said, "There's no need to be so anxious," helping to ease my tension. When we arrived at Fred's family home, Barbara welcomed me with a warm smile. "Well, hello there. I'm so glad you could make it. And Fred, it's been a while. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Amy. I hope you'll like this." As I spoke, I handed her the expensive gift I had purchased from the department store the other day. Barbara was delighted. "Oh my, how thoughtful of you. Thank you. I'll brew some tea, so you two just make yourselves at home." Barbara interacted with me in a comfortably distanced manner, and time passed peacefully. Regarding our marriage, Barbara smiled and said, "Congratulations, truly. I'm so happy that Fred is marrying a wonderful woman like you, Amy. I'm sure his father in heaven is thrilled too." I felt a profound sense of relief, grateful that Barbara was such a kind person. As noon approached, Barbara glanced at the clock and announced, "It's almost lunchtime. I'll whip something up, so you two be sure to eat before you go." I appreciated Barbara's offer, but I felt bad about making her go through the trouble and hesitated, unsure of how to respond. That's when Fred chimed in. Since it's a special occasion, why don't we all go out to eat? Didn't you mention a new restaurant that opened up nearby, Mom? Let's check it out. Ah, that's a good point. That restaurant is always packed with people, so the food must be delicious. It's settled then, let's head over right away. And so, the three of us went to the restaurant and enjoyed a pleasant lunch together. With that, the marriage announcement went smoothly. The following week, Fred and I visited my parents to share the news of our engagement. They were overjoyed. My parents seemed to take a strong liking to Fred, impressed by his polite demeanor. A few months later, we held our wedding ceremony. We invited many of our colleagues from work, and everyone celebrated with us grandly. One day, as we were enjoying our tranquil married life, we received a call from Barbara. She had taken a fall at home and injured her arm. Oh, what a pickle I'm in. I can move my arm, but I can't lift anything heavy. Doing household chores is such a struggle. Goodness, I never imagined I'd end up with an injury like this. Barbara said over the phone, her voice feeble. That's terrible. On my days off from work or whenever I can, I'll come over as much as possible. I assured her. Barbara hesitated for a moment, then made a suggestion that seemed difficult for her to say. Thank you, dear. But even though it's just a 30-minute drive, it would be a hassle for you to come so frequently, Amy. If possible, I'd be thrilled if you could move closer to my place. It would be great if you were within walking distance. Just having you two nearby would put my mind at ease. What do you think? Living alone, Barbara must have felt vulnerable after injuring her arm. I see, I understand. I'll discuss it with Fred and get back to you, I said. I immediately brought up the matter with Fred. Mom has probably been feeling lonely ever since Dad passed away. And with her arm injury, it's concerning. Maybe we should move closer to her. Are you okay with that, Amy? If you're not comfortable with the idea, please tell me honestly. It would make our commute to work a bit longer since the company would be farther away. Whenever Fred makes a decision, he always makes sure to consider my thoughts and feelings, rather than deciding on his own. Of course I don't mind. I'm worried about Barbara too, so let's find a place as close to her house as possible. That way, we can rush over quickly if needed. The longer commute time is still within a manageable range, so it's fine, I said with a smile. And so, we rented a condominium just a 5-minute walk from Barbara's place. Barbara was overjoyed, and as time passed, her arm injury gradually healed. Some time later, I discovered that I was pregnant. Fred, I think we're having a baby. I told him. Wait, really? Fred's eyes widened in surprise and delight. Barbara was also eagerly anticipating the arrival of her first grandchild, and we all looked forward to the day we could meet the baby. 3 days past my due date, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. After discussing it with Fred, we decided to name her Crystal. I worked up until shortly before giving birth, and then took childcare leave. Raising a child for the first time was challenging at times, but Fred was always actively involved in both housework and childcare, which I was immensely grateful for. Crystal grew up healthy and strong, showered with love and affection. I had always loved children, but I savored the blissful realization that my own child was unbelievably precious. When Crystal turned 2, we enrolled her in daycare, and I returned to work. Time flew by, and before we knew it, Crystal was in 1st grade. She had grown into an honest and kind-hearted child. After starting elementary school, we had her attend an after-school program. On days when the program was closed, Barbara would look after her. One such day, I dropped Crystal off at Barbara's as usual and went to work. After finishing for the day, I went to pick Crystal up from Barbara's house. To my surprise, Crystal's face seemed unusually flushed, which concerned me. I asked Barbara about it. Barbara, Crystal's face looks a bit red. Did something happen? Could she have a fever? Barbara replied, "Oh, she was just playing an active video game until a little while ago. That's all it is, nothing to worry about. She doesn't have a fever or anything." A video game? I didn't know you had video games at your place, Barbara, I said, puzzled. An acquaintance gave it to me. She got a bit too engrossed in it, that's probably why. The temperature is a little high today too. I nodded at Barbara's answer but decided to check with Crystal just in case. Crystal, you're not feeling sick or anything, right? No, it's nothing, Crystal replied, giving me an awkward nod. Are you sure you're okay? I asked again. This time, Crystal answered in a clearer tone than before. I'm fine. Don't worry about it, Mom. I'm fine. Don't worry about it, Mom. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with Crystal, so I decided to discuss it with Fred. After Crystal went to bed, I brought it up with Fred right away. You know, when I went to pick Crystal up from Barbara's house today, her face seemed unusually red. It looked like she was flushed. When I asked about the reason, Barbara said it was because she got too absorbed in a video game she received from an acquaintance. Crystal also said she was fine, but something about her behavior seemed strange to me. I wonder if it's really because of the game. Oh, that happened? But Crystal seemed her usual self at home, Fred said, surprised, as he tried to recall Crystal's behavior after returning home. Exactly. By the time she got home, the redness in her face had faded and she was happily going about her business. So I don't think there's anything to worry about, but something just doesn't sit right with me. I can't quite put my finger on it. Maybe I'm overthinking it. I understand. I'll try asking Mom and Crystal about it casually too. Thanks for telling me. Later, Fred inquired with Barbara and Crystal, but Barbara maintained that it was due to the video game, and Crystal simply said it was nothing. Crystal just keeps saying it's nothing, Fred reported back. I see. Then maybe I am worrying too much. Let's just keep an eye on the situation for a while. However, even after that, every time we left Crystal with Barbara, her face would be red. Growing genuinely concerned, I asked Crystal repeatedly what was wrong, but she would always respond with, "It's nothing. I'm fine." Once she got home, Crystal would draw pictures and spend time cheerfully, so it didn't seem like she was feeling unwell. That only made it all the more puzzling why her face would turn red whenever she went to Barbara's house. This never used to happen before, I muttered to myself as I started preparing dinner. Ever since she was little, Crystal had enjoyed helping me with cooking. So sometimes, I would ask Crystal to assist with simple, safe tasks like peeling eggshells or using a peeler to remove carrot skins. Tonight, I was making meatloaf, so I decided to have Crystal help with the kneading process. I chopped and sautéed the onions, then placed them in a large bowl along with the ground meat, breadcrumbs, eggs, and seasonings. With everything ready, I called out to Crystal, who was drawing. Crystal, want to help me knead the meatloaf together? Yeah, I'll do it, Crystal said with a smile, using her small hands to knead the meatloaf mixture. You're doing great. The stickiness is really coming together, so just a little more. With Crystal kneading it, I'm sure this meatloaf will turn out delicious. Let me know if you get tired, and I'll take over. When I praised her, Crystal grinned happily. Then, after a short while, I noticed Crystal staring intently at the kitchen knife. Why are you staring at the knife like that? Oh, could it be that you're interested in cutting too, Crystal? Should I buy you a kid's knife that's not too dangerous? Speaking of which, the other day at the department store, they were selling these cute children's knives with cat illustrations on them. Do you want to try using one, Crystal? When I asked her that, Crystal shook her head. Then, in a small voice, she said, I don't need one, and focused on kneading the meatloaf mixture. I thought I noticed Crystal's expression darken for a moment, but she quickly returned to her usual cheerful self, so I figured I must have imagined it. Just as the meatloaf was finished, Fred came home from work, and the three of us gathered around the dining table, enjoying a pleasant meal together as always. Crystal helped me knead the meatloaf, I told Fred. Oh, really? Fred said, looking impressed. That's great. Crystal, you're such a good girl for helping Mom out. The meatloaf is delicious. Praised by Fred, Crystal smiled shyly. During this blissful family time, I had completely forgotten about the strange incidents with Crystal. However, soon after, the worst possible event occurred. The next day, while I was at work, I received a call from Crystal's elementary school. Is this Crystal's mom? Crystal collapsed during her cooking class and has been rushed to the hospital. Please head to the hospital she was transported to immediately. Upon hearing this from the teacher, I felt the blood drain from my face. What? Is Crystal going to be all right? We don't have the details of her condition either. At the very least, she was barely conscious when the ambulance arrived, but I understand. I'll head to the hospital right away. I quickly explained the situation to my boss, hopped into a taxi, and made my way to the hospital. In the taxi, I was beside myself with worry for Crystal. Please, let her be okay. I prayed repeatedly in my heart for Crystal's safety. Soon after, Fred arrived at the hospital as well, and together we listened to the doctor explain Crystal's condition. Fortunately, her life was not in danger. She had collapsed due to anemia. Crystal was currently sleeping and had not yet woken up, but the doctor said she would regain consciousness soon. If her condition stabilized, it would be possible for her to return home today. Fred and I were relieved to hear that Crystal's life was not at risk, even though we were still worried about her. However, what the doctor said next left us in utter shock. While being transported, Crystal was apparently muttering something. She kept saying, "I'm sorry, Grandma. Mom, please don't hate me." What? During the ambulance ride, while Crystal was in a semi-conscious state, she had repeatedly murmured, as if talking in her sleep, "I'm sorry, Grandma. Mom, please don't hate me." My face turned ashen, and my body began to tremble. No matter how I looked at it, there was something going on between Barbara and Crystal. Why was Crystal apologizing to Barbara? Why did she think I would hate her? I glanced at Fred and saw that he was also perplexed and had turned pale. After the doctor left, I told Fred, "Crystal must have had some kind of altercation with Barbara, don't you think?" At my words, Fred nodded in agreement. "Yeah, I think so too. If Crystal said something like that, there's no doubt something happened." "You're right. I'm going to call Barbara." Fred and I stepped outside the hospital to avoid disturbing others and made the call. "Hello." Barbara answered promptly. "Hello, Barbara. It's Amy." "Oh, Amy. What's the matter, calling at this hour? Aren't you at work?" As Barbara wondered aloud, I immediately posed my question. "Crystal collapsed. Do you have any idea why?" "What? Crystal collapsed? What happened?" Barbara sounded extremely surprised, her voice unnaturally high-pitched. However, upon hearing what I said next, Barbara's attitude completely changed. Crystal collapsed during her cooking class at school. Apparently, while being transported to the hospital, she was muttering, "I'm sorry, Grandma. Mom, please don't hate me." People don't normally say things like that, right? Barbara, did you do something to Crystal? Humph. What a weakling. Barbara spat out. I was shocked to hear Barbara speak in a tone I'd never heard before. What? Barbara, what did you just say? I said she's a weakling. I was only trying to teach Crystal how to cook so she could become a proper woman. Barbara suddenly began shouting hysterically. Wait, cooking? This was the first I'd heard of Barbara teaching Crystal how to cook.
That's right. I was just teaching her to cook. But you know what? Crystal is utterly hopeless. She still touches knives like she's scared of them. I always make sure to instruct her strictly. It's your fault, Amy, for not teaching Crystal how to cook properly in the first place.
Hold on a second. Crystal is only 7 years old, you know? When it comes to cooking, I sometimes have her help with simple tasks, but I think it's too early to start teaching her seriously. Are you having Crystal handle knives at your place, Barbara? Surely you're using children's knives, right? Even in my confusion, I pressed Barbara for answers.
What kind of coddling nonsense are you spouting? Children's knives are like toys. I have her use regular adult knives. She's nowhere near mastering them, so I end up scolding her every time. It's a real hassle for me too. You're spoiling Crystal too much, Amy. That's why she's grown up to be such a weakling. Are you even fit to be a mother?
As Barbara berated me in a ranting manner, anger welled up inside me, and I opened my mouth to retort. But before I could utter a word, Fred yelled at Barbara.
Mom, what are you thinking? We never asked you to teach Crystal how to cook, not even once. And what's this about you scolding Crystal? What, Fred? You were there too? I thought it was just Amy. If Fred was there, you should have said so from the start.
Barbara seemed surprised, not having expected Fred to be by my side.
Is it a problem that I'm here? Could it be that the stress from you is what caused Crystal to collapse this time? Mom, explain yourself.
Fred's face was red with anger as he interrogated Barbara.
No, that's not stress. I mean, sure, I was a bit strict, but only a little. You see, I just wanted Crystal to grow up to be a fine woman. That's all I had in mind. So I haven't done anything wrong, right? Fred, please don't be so angry.
Barbara made excuses, but Fred coldly told her, Enough. I can't trust your words, so I'll ask Crystal directly when she wakes up. Mom, don't think this will end here. Bye. With that, he hung up the phone unilaterally. When the weekend arrived, Fred and I headed to a certain place. Crystal was staying at my parents' house, being looked after by them. Our destination was just a short walk away, so we arrived in 5 minutes. I wonder if Barbara is home, I said. Mom hates mornings. It's only 9 a.m., so she's definitely there. Fred replied. Yes, the place we arrived at was Barbara's house. When we rang the doorbell, Barbara appeared after a while, wearing pajamas.
What are you two doing here, showing up without any notice?
Barbara's eyes widened upon seeing us. Mom, we're coming in, Fred said as he stepped into the house, and I followed suit.
Hey, wait! What's the meaning of this, barging in all of a sudden?
Barbara was flustered, but I ignored her and chased after Fred. Our destination was the kitchen. It was my first time entering the kitchen at Barbara's house, and the sight that greeted me was far from tidy and organized. There was a pile of dirty dishes, and ladles and spatulas were scattered haphazardly. The only seasonings I could spot were salt and sugar. As I stood there in shock, Fred revealed a startling fact. Mom has always been terrible at cooking. She has absolutely no self-awareness about it, though. What? As I stood there at a loss for words.
Hey, don't just go into the kitchen without permission.
Barbara started shouting. Fred ignored Barbara and began to speak. Mom is the type who doesn't trust recipes and cooks everything her own way. Basically, everything she makes is unappetizing. She thinks she can manage as long as she has salt, sugar, and butter. She claims to taste her cooking, but I guess she's just tone deaf when it comes to flavor. And yet, she's convinced that she's a great cook, which is terrifying.
No matter how much Dad and I complained, she never listened to a word we said.
I had never eaten Barbara's cooking, so I had no idea. Whenever we had meals at Barbara's house, we usually opted for delivery or dining out. But thinking back, I feel like Fred always managed to steer the situation in a way that allowed him to avoid eating Barbara's home-cooked meals. Despite being terrible at cooking, Barbara had been forcibly teaching Crystal how to cook. I felt my anger rising even more.
Fred! Stop saying whatever you want!
Barbara yelled, but Fred continued to ignore her.
The kitchen is as filthy as ever.
Fred muttered bitterly as he opened the refrigerator. The fridge wasn't adequately stocked with ingredients, but there were a few new cucumbers prepared. On the day Crystal collapsed, after the phone call with Barbara, we spoke to Crystal as soon as she woke up. At first, Crystal was reluctant to talk, but Fred and I earnestly conveyed our feelings to her.
Mommy and Daddy love you no matter what, Crystal. We love you more than anything in the world.
I looked straight into Crystal's eyes and told her firmly. Really? Crystal's eyes wavered with uncertainty, but Fred also spoke to her gently. That's right. You're Daddy and Mommy's treasure, Crystal. Finally feeling reassured, Crystal began to talk little by little. Grandma forced me to hold a knife and told me to practice cutting cucumbers quickly. Apparently, Barbara had made Crystal hold an adult knife and relentlessly practice cutting a cucumber within 20 seconds. Crystal had only ever used a peeler before, so she was scared and didn't want to do it, but Barbara yelled at her and forced the knife into her hand.
She made you do that against your will.
When I asked in surprise, Crystal nodded. Yeah, I was really scared of Grandma, so I had no choice but to do it. Moreover, if Crystal made even the slightest mistake, Barbara would immediately scold her harshly. As a result, Crystal was cutting cucumbers under extreme tension every time. That's why her face was always red when she came back from Barbara's house. It seems that Barbara was also the reason why Crystal collapsed during her cooking class. The memory of being scolded by Barbara and the sensation of gripping the knife in class triggered a strong fear of failure, causing her to faint from anemia.
You know, I was always scared and hated cooking with Grandma, but I love cooking with Mommy. Because Mommy always praises me. And Daddy always tells me that the food Mommy and I make is delicious, which made me really happy.
Crystal, thank you for telling us. Can I ask why you couldn't talk to Mommy or Daddy about this until now? I gently inquired, as I had been wondering all along why Crystal hadn't told us about this before. That's because Grandma said that girls who are bad at cooking will be hated by their moms. I thought if I told you about this, you would think I'm bad at cooking and end up hating me. Upon hearing Crystal's words, I felt intense anger and hatred towards Barbara. It seemed Fred felt the same way. Fred and I reassured Crystal once again, gently telling her,
That would never happen. Even if you were bad at cooking, we would still love you just the same, Crystal. There's absolutely no way Mommy and Daddy could ever hate you. Don't worry.
When we told her that, Crystal smiled as if relieved. And Crystal was able to return home that very day. After tucking Crystal into bed,
I want to see Barbara's kitchen. I need to see for myself the place where Crystal was made to suffer,
I told Fred.
All right. Let's go this weekend.
Fred agreed. We quickly explained the situation to my parents, and they agreed to come over. Standing in front of the dilapidated kitchen, I felt so angry I could have collapsed, thinking about how Crystal had endured such hardship in this place. Fred spoke to Barbara in a harsh tone.
Mom, you're in no position to teach Crystal how to cook when you're terrible at it yourself. What you did to Crystal is absolutely unforgivable. Forcing a 7-year-old child to use an adult knife. I seriously question your sanity. What? I'm not bad at cooking. What's wrong with teaching my granddaughter how to cook? I just thought it would be good for her to get used to knives from an early age. If she had obediently listened to me from the start, I wouldn't have had to force her. Everything I did was for Crystal's sake. Why am I being blamed so much for this?
Barbara showed no sign of remorse whatsoever, instead taking on a defiant attitude. Barbara, you repeatedly told Crystal that girls who can't cook will be scolded by their moms, trying to manipulate her emotionally, didn't you? Because of that, Crystal couldn't come to us for help and suffered in silence. I also unleashed my anger at Barbara, but she just laughed mockingly. Oh please, if you had properly taught Crystal how to cook in the first place, none of this would have happened. Honestly, it's your fault that Crystal has grown up to be such a spoiled brat.
Don't screw with us. We're cutting ties with you, Mom. We're moving away to get away from you. Your arm has long since healed, and from now on, we won't contact you at all, and we'll never see you again.
At Fred's words, Barbara's face instantly turned ashen, and she started to panic.
Wait a minute. Cutting ties, that's too extreme. There's no need to get so angry over something like this. Don't say you're moving. Don't leave me alone. I'm your only mother, aren't I? Please, just stay by my side forever.
Barbara clung to Fred, but of course, he ignored her. Then she started cozying up to me.
Hey, Amy. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I won't force anything on Crystal anymore. Please don't leave me alone.
I will never forgive you for what you put Crystal through. You, who can so easily declare others unfit to be mothers, must be a wonderful mom yourself, so I'm sure you'll be just fine on your own. I told her with a smile, and left Barbara's house together with Fred. As we stepped outside, we saw Crystal had come with my parents.
Crystal, you're here too?
I asked. Yeah, I have something I want to say to Grandma, Crystal replied. Just then, Barbara came out of the house, shouting,
Wait, you too!
When Barbara saw Crystal and my parents, she muttered with an awkward expression, Crystal and Amy's parents too. Crystal firmly told Barbara, I have more fun cooking with Mommy, so I won't learn from you anymore, Grandma. I never want to see you again. I have more fun cooking with Mommy, so I won't learn from you anymore, Grandma. I never want to see you again. Leaving a stunned Barbara behind, we all returned home together. After that, we quickly found a suitable place far away from Barbara's house and moved immediately. By coincidence, our new home was closer to my parents' place, so we started having meals with them once a month. I was worried that Crystal might start hating cooking because of Barbara, but whenever she cooked with me, Crystal always smiled happily. When I bought Crystal a cute children's knife with a cat pattern on it, she was overjoyed and started enthusiastically practicing cutting vegetables with it. Before long, she became skilled at using the knife.
Crystal, you're getting better and better at this. That's amazing.
I praised her. I'm happy when you praise me, Mommy. I want to become even better at cutting, Crystal said, flashing me a big smile. As for Barbara's recent situation, according to what Fred heard from his relatives, she's in a miserable state. Barbara had always eaten out frequently and was prone to obesity. After cutting ties with us, her eating habits worsened and her weight kept increasing. Eventually, it seems she injured her foot due to her weight. She tried calling us, but of course, we had her number blocked, so she couldn't get through. Apparently, she turned to her relatives for help. However, Barbara had never gotten along well with her relatives. They disliked her overconfidence in her poor cooking skills and her tendency to force her values on others, so they saw her as a nuisance. But they couldn't just ignore Barbara when she came to them with an injured foot, so they reluctantly provided her with a spare room to live in. However, it seems that for Barbara, every day is filled with stress. In exchange for providing her with a room, the relatives are supposedly pushing household chores onto Barbara despite her foot injury and complaining about how terrible her cooking is. And so, Barbara is apparently living through hell every single day. Fred and I vowed to be careful never to let Crystal suffer like that again. We're making an effort to spend even more time with Crystal, not just focusing on work. We want to build a family where we can discuss anything openly, and continue supporting each other as a family of 3 in our daily lives. Think you should go on that trip? I said with a cold voice, only to be met with an annoyed glare from my husband. He was getting ready to join his company's retreat, clearly not thrilled about my input.
Look, it's not like I'm going out to play. It's a social obligation, and I can't just not show up without a good reason.
He retorted in a mocking tone, followed by an exaggerated sigh. Well, I've warned you. Just don't regret it later. I responded. My name is Grace. Currently, I'm a 28-year-old housewife. Anthony, my husband, and I have been together since our college days and got married after we both started working. He's 2 years older than me, and we got closer because we were in the same club. Well, to be more accurate, I joined the club because I was attracted to him. When I was a freshman, I was club hopping with some new friends I made. That's when I met Anthony, who was exceptionally noticeable due to his good looks while handing out flyers as the head of the club. One of my friends fell for him instantly and decided to join the club even before hearing what it was about. Eventually, dragged along by her enthusiasm, the rest of us submitted our membership forms and started participating. Unlike in middle or high school, I figured if I didn't like the club since it was just a hobby, I could just leave. That was the mindset of my other friends too, and we had agreed to join something anyways. Deep down, I also found Anthony charming. However, when the friend who had decided to join because of him started making moves, I decided to step back. Plus, there were quite a few other fans of his, making it difficult to get close. But, how did I end up marrying him, you might ask? It was during the cultural festival that year, where our relationship rapidly developed. We were part of the music club, which performed in several groups during the festival. Anthony and I, along with a few others, ended up forming a band. For the first time, I felt genuinely glad to have joined the club and practiced an instrument. Discovering the joy of playing, I spent my free time in the club room. As the festival approached, I was there even more often. Sometimes, it was just Anthony and me, and through these moments, we grew closer and started dating after the festival, with me making the first move. However, after our successful performance at the festival, Anthony gained more admirers, and I chose to keep our relationship a secret. I wanted to brag about being with him, and he said it was unnecessary to hide. But he didn't understand my fear of other women's jealousy. We often targeted weekdays when it was less crowded for our outings. It felt like a secret date, which was fun in its own way, and I cherished the time I could spend with my husband. But then, he started his job search. Until he got an offer, even my usually calm husband was understandably tense. He seemed to have less time for part-time jobs, often complaining about being broke every time we met. Since the days we could meet were getting fewer, I secretly increased my shifts and used the money I earned to cook for him. I feel pathetic having to rely on this, he would say, yet he happily devoured every meal I made. From that time, I vaguely imagined our life together as a married couple, though I thought it was too soon to mention it to my busy boyfriend. Eventually, when he landed a job and graduated, and I had my graduation confirmed, we got engaged. He rented a new apartment due to his job, and I often visited, almost living there. We were in a semi-cohabiting state, but he paid for the rent and utilities with his salary, so I helped out with household chores in return. I would make meals to last several days and store them in the fridge, take out the trash in the morning, and clean the bathroom and toilet. I thought I was doing well, but it turned out my husband was quite lazy. When I couldn't come over for a week due to some errands, I found the floor littered with trash. Maybe because it was his first year working, he often had entertainment duties and would leave the room unventilated. Opening the door to a room filled with the smell of sweat and garbage required bravery. But I loved my hard-working husband, and I appreciated his thoughtfulness, like bringing home fancy sweets to say thank you. After graduating, I worked in an office for a year, but then, at my husband's strong request, I became a housewife. The reason was simple. I want you to take care of the house. His lifestyle habits remained the same, with me handling most of the household chores. Additionally, the number of drinking parties increased over the years, making financial management challenging. However, since we lived on my husband's income, it was hard to ask him to cut down on social gatherings. He was supportive when I occasionally met with friends, even giving me some pocket money for those outings. But I couldn't stay silent and watch our household expenses increase, so I brought it up with him several times. At first, he would say, "It's okay, the entertaining expenses are covered by the company. The money comes back." But gradually, he started giving specific reasons, like, "Today is a colleague's birthday," or "I can't miss a promotion celebration." It became harder for me to object. My husband had a close group of friends at work. I heard from a university friend who also landed a job there. That friend was the one who had a crush on him and led us to join the club. She was already married and said it was a coincidence that she ended up working at the same place as my husband. When I mentioned my husband was Anthony, she had to think for a moment.
Who was that again?
It seems she had completely forgotten about the man she once eagerly pursued. She told me a lot about my husband. He was always with his close-knit group, and there were no other women involved, which was a relief. But the weekly spending on drinks was a problem. I kept asking him to cut back on the drinking sessions, but he couldn't refuse invitations from dear friends. Even when I argued about the expenses, he only suggested reducing the amount spent per occasion instead of not going at all. Looking back, we should have had a serious discussion about this early in our marriage. As time went on, things became more ambiguous, and I started to give up. My husband stopped mentioning his outings unless I asked, and it seemed like he had created his own rule of going out on weekends. Approaching his 30s, he hadn't changed his living habits from his student days, only capable of leaving his clothes on the floor. I had gotten used to taking care of him, so even though I was frustrated, I stopped bringing it up. I figured if we were going to fight about it, I might as well let him do what he wanted. Then one day, my husband mentioned he would be joining the company's retreat.
A company retreat when it's not even a long weekend?
If it were during a long weekend, everywhere would be crowded.
The idea is to go at a different time so we can actually relax,
he explained. I'm okay with him participating in the trip since he's been working hard. But the cost is what worries me. Even if the travel expenses are covered, things like meals and souvenirs will likely be out of pocket. With the warmer days, his drinking outings have become more frequent, and our expenses have grown more severe. And there's something about this retreat that's bothering me.
Maybe you should skip it? You've been really busy lately and must be exhausted. It's a work obligation, and everyone's expected to go,
he said, though his expression softened. He seemed really keen on going. For once, I pressed harder.
Are you sure you want to go? We can't afford to spend more right now with all our bills.
Thinking I was angry, he raised his voice.
Are you seriously telling me not to go now? You say we don't have money, but it's all coming from my salary anyway. Don't act so high and mighty.
It seems he made me a housewife just to say this, thinking it would silence me. True to form, I stayed quiet, and he, feeling reassured, said,
You've had fewer friends since we got married. You're just jealous of me.
I was irritated but too dismayed to retort. Who's been sacrificing social ties to keep this household running? I was on the verge of saying it but lacked the energy to bother. Fine, do whatever you want. At that, he momentarily looked triumphant. Then patronizingly patted my head, asking sweetly,
What would you like for a souvenir?
Ever since college, he's believed his wife adores him. Having been quite popular, his self-esteem seems quite inflated. His life has been so charmed that his lack of malice is actually more problematic. Turns out, the trip was set for the very next day, and he left early in the morning, full of enthusiasm. Surprisingly, he managed all the preparations himself, dragging along a neat suitcase he must have bought at some point. During the week he was gone, I had a peaceful time. It made me wonder if this is how it feels when your children are grown and independent. I've essentially been raising a large child for years. Taking a week off won't hurt. By the time he returned from the trip, it was already late at night. He seemed a bit worn out, probably from taking the night bus.
Were you okay this week? I was worried about the bills and everything.
Yeah, everything was fine, I assured him.
See, I told you there was nothing to worry about. I'll start earning again from next week, so don't fret,
he said, perhaps a bit smugly after drinking on the bus. I was annoyed but didn't show it, simply replying, Maybe so, and tried to leave. However, he didn't like my response and shouted after me,
What's with that attitude?
As he's gotten older, he tends to get angry suddenly when he got drunk. I was surprised at first, but now it's become routine whenever he returns from drinking. I'm tired too. Please don't raise your voice. Make sure all your laundry is in the basket, and if there's trash, sort it out. I'm going to bed now. He said something else, but I quickly went to bed. The next morning, his phone rang early. Annoyed, he got up, glanced at the screen, and clicked his tongue. I took the day off. What now? It was his office calling. He got up, left the bedroom. And I secretly watched, somewhat predicting what would happen next. After a few minutes on the phone, he changed into a suit and left the house. Wondering when he would come back, I woke up to wash the pile of clothes he had left behind. It was a few hours later when my husband returned. As soon as he entered the house, he called out to me, shouting,
This is all your fault for causing such a mess.
Let's rewind to a week ago. In the evening, after hearing about the company retreat from my husband, I immediately called a friend. I had never heard about the retreat from her, despite our daily chats. When she said,
There's no company retreat,
I realized something. My husband probably lied about going on the retreat to avoid being stopped by me. Perhaps to hang out with those colleagues, or maybe even to meet another woman. Either way, I no longer cared. Who would sympathize with a husband who lies and abandons his wife to go out? Before I knew it, I was asking my friend for a favor. To report this to the company. After all, we were barely making ends meet. There was no way he could afford a week-long trip on his own. If the retreat was a lie, where would the money for it come from? Though I didn't want to think about it, my friend and I eventually came to the same conclusion. I told her it would be great if she could say she was the one who leaked it. My friend seemed to have acted immediately. The company waited for them to return from their trip and then called them in. During that time, the company thoroughly investigated them. What followed was a series of records of misused expenses being uncovered. Their desks were found to be filled with blank receipts from various stores. They likely used these to falsely claim expenses for their numerous drinking outings, applying this money towards their trip this time. This was mostly accurate, and they admitted their guilt when called in.
We plan to submit it as a business expense for the retreat,
They confessed. Everyone involved had repeatedly misused expenses, leading to a total loss of around several $1,000s. Naturally, they were all dismissed and faced claims for restitution and damages. Furious upon returning, my husband yelled at me,
"This is all your fault."
I don't know why he thought I reported him to the company. Since my friend was the one who actually reported it, I was relieved she wouldn't be harmed. Ignoring his own actions, he raged in front of me, where I presented him with the already filled-out divorce papers.
"Getting caught was your own fault. That's why I told you to cancel the trip. But if you've been doing this all along, it was bound to come out sooner or later."
Though he glared and trembled, he snatched the divorce papers, saying,
"I'm better off without a snitching, spiteful wife,"
and threw them at me as if to slap me with them.
"Good, this makes things easier. Goodbye, then."
With that, I left, carrying the bags I had already packed. He kept his back to me until I left the room, perhaps out of pride. I caught a glimpse of his graying hairline and felt a twinge of sadness for the Anthony I once admired. Then, I headed to the small apartment I had already arranged. I never thought I'd use my savings from a year of work this way. Although I had some savings, the initial moving costs significantly depleted. Now, I need to find a job. After being a housewife for so long without any particular qualifications, I wonder if I can find work. At first, any job will do. I decided to work and become independent. After informing my parents about the finalized divorce, I also contacted my friend. One of them, concerned about me, suggested we meet up after a long time. That's right. Now that I'm divorced, I should live my life freely. I won't be forced to do household chores for anyone else. I just need to take care of myself. What a freedom. The next day, after spending a day unpacking, I immediately started looking for a job. I found some listings on job sites, prepared my applications, and went for interviews. Before I knew it, 2 weeks had passed while I was busy with this routine. The calls from my ex-husband became more frequent. On the other end of the phone, Anthony alternated between anger and tears. Having relied on me for household and financial management, he had run out of money within these 2 weeks. He had no savings habit, so his account was completely empty. With several bills due at the end of the month, Anthony asked me for a loan, saying, "We're divorced, so I have no obligation to pay for you. If you really need a loan, are you okay with interest?
Why do you have spare money? Aren't you ashamed to have been saving secretly just for yourself? This calls for a redistribution of property. Come back right now."
Anthony, infuriated by my advantageous position, screamed so loudly the audio cracked.
"It's fine if you want to claim a redistribution of property, but that process is complicated and time-consuming. By the time you get it sorted, the month's end will be here. Then come over right now and give me half. Or remarry me for a while and take care of me."
Frustrated by Anthony's self-centered demands, I ended the call without a word. I realized there was no getting through to him, and the thought of still being liked by him became physically repulsive. Of course, after setting my phone to block his calls, they stopped. Eventually, I secured a job at a food factory. Wanting to avoid any trouble with Anthony, I opted for a behind-the-scenes role. Working and sweating after a long break felt refreshing. Being single again, I reconnected with friends from my student days and started going out more. After a few meetings, my friends said I looked rejuvenated, and I felt a profound sense of fulfillment in my daily life.
"I never imagined our house could be burgled,"
I muttered to myself. The day after our home was burglarized, I still couldn't grasp that it had happened to me. I was reflecting on my inability to act at the moment. Mother-in-law, concerned, hurriedly asked, Did you see the face of the culprit? However, an event that would save me from despair happened shortly after. My name is Mia. I'm 29 years old. I was married to Thomas, a year older than me, and we had a reasonably happy life. But recently, after losing Dad, I've felt a gaping hole in my heart. Dad gave me not only a lot of love, but also many lessons. Even after retiring, Dad never felt left behind by the current times. I remember him studying about money with enthusiasm, even as many others settled into a quiet life receiving their pensions. Dad continued to learn new things after retirement, never stopping despite my concerns. Worried, I suggested, "Dad, you've retired from your job. Why not take a break for a while?" But Dad, with a cheerful smile, replied,
"I've worked hard for many years and can't suddenly stop. I'm just doing things I'm interested in as my way of preventing dementia. Don't worry about me."
Half in disbelief yet fond of Dad, I watched over his actions, thinking if it's what he likes, then it's okay. When I got married, Dad was overjoyed, saying,
"I'm relieved to see Mia so happy. I have no regrets in this world,"
with tears in his eyes. My husband and I, telling Dad to stop joking, laughed together. A few days after the wedding, Dad and I spent some father-daughter time together, during which he said,
"Mia, I'll leave you plenty of money, so don't worry about finances even if you start a family."
To which I replied, "Dad, I appreciate the thought, but don't waste your retirement like that. Actually, I want to take you on a trip. Let's enjoy some leisure time together." I thought I'd finally be able to show my gratitude. However, Dad, who had been so vibrant, suddenly passed away, and I was left feeling hopeless after the funeral. Seeing Dad's inheritance was shocking. Gold bars? I was speechless at the sight, not knowing their significance initially. But I soon learned of Dad's intentions. Research revealed that gold bars hold their value over years, hardly depreciating. Dad left me a lasting fortune to secure my future even decades after his passing. Reflecting on it, Dad often said,
"In today's world, the value of money can fluctuate, so Mia, you should do your research."
At the time, I dismissed it due to daily busyness. Realizing now that Dad converted his wealth into gold bars to leave it for me, I couldn't be more grateful. Wanting to honor Dad's wishes, I kept the gold bars hidden even from my husband. Yet, someone had the audacity to say,
"I heard Mia's dad passed away, so you must have gotten a hefty inheritance, right? Share some with me."
Shockingly, these words came from my husband. His words were so unthinkable that I didn't respond. Then he said,
"I've been feeling unmotivated at work and thinking of quitting to make a quick fortune. Winning a little makes me feel recognized, and it'd be a relief for you too if I became wealthy, right?"
Realizing what he meant, I asked,
"Is that some kind of gambling?"
He boasted,
"Well, kinda. But I'm not like those unsuccessful gamblers."
I thought about discussing and deciding together on necessities like a house or car for us as a couple. But then, my husband started saying,
"I also want to upgrade everything I wear to high-end brands."
I was speechless, not knowing he was this kind of person. I decided to keep it stored in a safe that only I could access. To me, what Dad left behind is as precious as life itself. I couldn't bear to squander it on my husband's whims, so I refused. However, since he wouldn't give up asking, I took the bold step of consulting my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law had been supportive since I was dating her son and continued to be so after marriage. After I told mother-in-law everything, she listened, nodding, and said, "I'm sorry about this. Let's have a discussion, the three of us." When I mentioned to my husband that we would discuss Dad's inheritance with mother-in-law, he seemed thrilled, thinking his wishes would finally be met. Later, eager to state his case, he said,
"Given the uncertainty of lifelong employment, I've been working on a side hustle. I'd like a share of Mia's dad's inheritance to make it successful."
A side hustle, or rather, gambling. I almost blurted out, but mother-in-law immediately mentioned, "I saw you entering a slot shop recently." The room froze at her words. My husband made feeble excuses but was asked by mother-in-law to show his savings, revealing almost nothing. Mother-in-law scolded him with an expression I'd never seen before. "Thomas, enough is enough. Work properly without complaints. If you target me as dad's inheritance again, I won't forgive you." Yet, my husband responded with dissatisfaction.
Okay, I get it. But you're both taking a joke too seriously,"
I said. "There are things you can joke about and things you shouldn't." To which mother-in-law added, "Exactly. Haven't I always taught you that?" Embarrassed by the scolding from both of us, he left for home as if fleeing. I thanked mother-in-law, saying,
"I couldn't have persuaded him alone. Thank you."
Mother-in-law replied, "It's okay. Thank you for marrying such a son." In return, she thanked me. Then she muttered, "Thomas really is a handful." I didn't miss a word and asked,
"Does that mean Stephen too?"
Mother-in-law nodded slightly. I knew Thomas had a brother named Stephen but hadn't really spoken to him. We only greeted each other during a family meeting, and I remembered his voice being deeper than Thomas's. I regret not having tried to interact more, not knowing how to approach him. I took this opportunity to ask mother-in-law about brother-in-law. Mother-in-law said, "Stephen quits jobs as soon as he dislikes them and is currently freelancing. I'm worried about his future. I wish he would settle into a stable job, but job changes are becoming more common these days." Mother-in-law continued, but it seemed brother-in-law's reasons for quitting were somewhat trivial. Mother-in-law had been worried for a long time. I couldn't admonish brother-in-law myself, so I just listened to mother-in-law, who had been worried for a long time. Worried about mother-in-law's well-being, I bought a concert ticket for her too. And we decided to go together, hoping it would help her relax and refresh. On the day of the concert, my husband had already left for work, and I was looking forward to it with mother-in-law. But after walking a bit, I felt like I had forgotten something. After rummaging through my bag, I realized in horror. I'm sorry. I forgot the most important thing, the tickets. When I told mother-in-law, she surprisingly said,
"It's okay. We can go back and make it. Let's go together."
I'm sorry. Please wait here, I'll run back and get them. And ran off. I burst through the front door, heading straight for the room. There, in front of the safe containing Dad's inheritance, I encountered a person clad entirely in black. In my haste, and unsure if I was dreaming or awake, I screamed. The burglar shoved me aside and fled. Although I was confused about what was happening, I confirmed the burglar had taken the gold bars and immediately called the police. I explained everything to mother-in-law at home and apologized. When the police arrived and I was describing the burglar's features and the situation, mother-in-law rushed over to my house, anxiously asking,
"Mia, are you okay? You really encountered the burglar? Did you see his face? Did you tell the police everything?" I shook my head in despair.
While mother-in-law was saddened, I reassured her. It's okay. The police are here, taking my statement. Then, looking at the safe, mother-in-law lamented. Oh, what a mess. I hadn't shared the code or hiding place with anyone. Although it was only until I could deposit them in a bank safe, the safe I had chosen was among the most secure available commercially. supposedly impervious to ordinary household tools. The police, having seen the scene, speculated that the burglar either had specialized tools or was an experienced criminal. I continued to provide details to the police. Afterwards, I told mother-in-law, "The investigation will start now and it might take a while, so please go back home and rest for now." "I'm sorry for today," mother-in-law responded.
All right. I don't want to be in the way. I'll contact you later.
And left. However, mother-in-law returned about an hour later, drenched in sweat.
Mia, listen,
She exclaimed, causing me and the police to freeze and turn towards her. "What happened?" I asked, to which mother-in-law revealed.
When I went back, I saw Stephen entering his room with something that looked like gold bars. I thought I should get evidence before confronting him, so I didn't question him right away. It's about your dad's inheritance, isn't it?
When mother-in-law mentioned that, I immediately responded.
It's the gold bars.
Mother-in-law said.
Understood. Now, listen to this.
And played a recording from her phone for us.
I managed to get the stuff out, but Mia caught me at the worst possible moment.
Really screwed up there.
And knowing how she showed up just then.
The recording clearly captured someone speaking foully. That low and distinctive voice was unmistakably Stephen's. I was certain of it. It also captured a strategy session over the phone with my husband on how to deceive the police if questioned. After recording the scene, mother-in-law, though shocked, submitted it to the police. Apologizing, mother-in-law said, "I'm really sorry for causing you distress. I just thought I had to secure some evidence." I quickly assured her, "You did nothing wrong, Thomas's mom. My primary concern is catching the burglar as soon as possible. Your evidence was incredibly helpful." "Thank you." The police immediately headed to brother-in-law's location, where he confessed to conspiring with my husband.
Thomas wanted the gold bars to pay compensation to his mistress's husband.
Brother-in-law revealed. Mother-in-law and I were stunned, blurting out,
What? An affair?
Nodding, brother-in-law continued.
My brother was trying to convince Mia to hand over the gold bars to cover up the affair without it being discovered.
Hearing this, I remarked,
Thomas said he was gambling, thinking that would convince me?
Brother-in-law replied,
He started gambling on his own, hoping to pay off without any help. But as his savings dwindled, he became desperate and tried to persuade Mia to give him the gold bars.
That explains the time my husband begged for money. I thought to myself. When I asked,
And then?
Brother-in-law continued.
A few days later, when Mia wouldn't agree, Thomas called again, saying we'd execute the burglary plan on a day Mia was out. He promised me a share if we succeeded, so I followed his instructions and committed the crime.
Hearing this, I realized my husband had his brother do it, likely because he knew his own physique and mannerisms might give him away. Not only was Dad's inheritance stolen, but I also learned of the affair, and I decided it was over with my husband. Just as brother-in-law had confessed, my husband returned home.
Mia, I've heard about what happened. Are you hurt? Everything okay?
He asked, putting on a poorly acted concern. Unaware of brother-in-law's confession, my husband was puzzled by the cold looks around him, saying,
Well, losing Dad's precious inheritance is sad, but what's lost is lost, right? We can rebuild our fortune together from scratch.
Trying to dismiss the police and grab my shoulder. Disgusted by my husband after hearing everything from brother-in-law, I pushed him away, saying,
Stop. Don't touch me.
Surprised, he looked at me.
Mia, what's gotten into you all of a sudden? You're scared of the police, right? Let's talk, just the two of us.
Trying to drag me outside forcibly. I resisted, but he was too strong and dragged me along, leaving me feeling helpless. The police intervened. She said to stop, so let her go, restraining him with several officers.
Everything from the burglary plan to your affair has been exposed.
The police informed him as he struggled and attempted to flee. However, his escape was futile and he was caught. Thus, the gold bars were safely returned to me. The day after the burglary incident, still in disbelief, I muttered to myself, "I never imagined a burglary could happen at my house." Unforgivable actions by my husband and brother-in-law led me to file a lawsuit immediately. While my husband received a suspended sentence, brother-in-law, having no job and supporting himself through crime, was found guilty of other offenses and received a prison sentence. Brother-in-law had the tools for the job, and it wasn't his first time breaking safes. I hoped this would be a wake-up call for others involved in crime. Mother-in-law, devastated by her son's actions, tearfully said, "I hope they fully pay for their crimes." My heart ached, but preventing further victims was necessary. I demanded compensation from my husband and his mistress. My husband, now facing a slew of misfortunes, desperately pleaded, "Let's not divorce, Mia. It was all my fault. I only love you. I can't pay the compensation." Resorting to tears, but I felt no sympathy and refused to forgive him.
How are you planning to cash them? Did you really think you could just walk into a shop with a large amount of gold bars and smoothly sell them? You need a personal number to sell something of this size. Did you think you could just use the inheritance I received as you pleased?
Stumbling over his words, my husband admitted, "When you put it that way, yes." He knew he had no right to decide how to use my inherited wealth.
Blinded by immediate financial gain, you didn't think through the consequences of your actions.
I told him, and he could only look down, silent. Searching for a way to break into such a sturdy safe, committing a crime to get his hands on it. Yet not thinking about the aftermath at all was absurdly foolish. I announced our divorce right there and then. Finally, after all the procedures were completed, I felt relieved. The move, funded by my husband's compensation, was completed. I became a free person. As for my husband, his misdeeds were exposed to his company, leading to his job loss. Disowned by his family and with no savings, he began doing day labor to pay the compensation. Struggling with his deteriorating life and failing workplace relationships. It seems he planned another burglary due to being unable to cope with these challenges. Naturally, without any accomplices, he was caught by the returning residents and beaten. "It's the second time. Please have mercy," my husband reportedly pleaded, but the residents mercilessly called the police. He was sentenced to prison. This time, he truly couldn't return to a normal life. The burglary occurred near my previous home, and I heard the story directly from the neighbor involved. After the first burglary at my former house, my husband became well known throughout the neighborhood. Without the means to go far, he committed another crime nearby. Finally, we parted with, "It's a dangerous world out there. Let's both be careful. Take care." After the trial, mother-in-law was mentally damaged and struggled to recover. So, I frequently visited and maintained our relationship. I wanted to do everything I could for mother-in-law, who had always been kind to me. Thanks to my care, mother-in-law gradually recovered. We still have a good relationship today. I want to live my life gratefully for the peaceful days and the people around me, hoping for this tranquility to last forever. One day, 6 months after Jane, who married into a family of doctors, started living with her in-laws, I was relaxing in the living room when I received a call on my mobile phone, which I had left nearby. It had been a while since I last saw Jane's name pop up on my screen once or twice a month, and I hurried to answer the call.
Jane? Hello? Can you hear me? What happened, not contacting me for half a year?
Mom, help me. With a voice so frail it seemed squeezed out, that's all she said before I heard something fall on the other side of the phone.
What? Jane? Jane? Where are you now? At Susan's house?
I'm so starving, I can't take it anymore. I want to see Tom and Emma. Mom and Dad. I barely made out her choppy voice. It was clear she must have dropped the phone, and her voice faded away. As I was getting agitated, my husband Jim, who had been working from home, came down from the second floor. What's wrong? A call from Jane?
Jim! Jane is in danger!
Jim immediately grabbed his car keys and wallet and dashed out, and I hurried into the car while keeping the line open.
Jane, wait! We're coming now!
Despite the early spring chill, we forgot to turn on the car's heater as we rushed over. Upon arriving at my daughter's in-laws, Jim and I pushed our way inside somewhat forcefully. There we found Jane, lying weakly. My name is Mary, 55 years old. I'm a housewife living with my husband Jim, who is a year older than me. Jim and I met through a mutual college friend's introduction. We discovered we both loved movies while having dinner with friends, and hit it off right then and there. Since then, we've watched various genres of movies together, from action to romantic comedies and horror, and reminiscing about discussing our thoughts over meals remains a fond memory. After dating for about a year, we got married. Jim joined a company after graduating from college and has been working there ever since. Now, with retirement looming, he often muses over a drink about how we might spend our time. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad to live a quiet life in the countryside now that Jane has moved out. Jane is our daughter. She was conceived soon after we got married, and despite a difficult birth, she was born safely and has grown up well. I once told Jane about the time when she was born. I shared how the nurses took care of Jane on my behalf, how they made sure I wasn't burdened, and how they helped me. Hearing this, Jane seemed to realize the importance and preciousness of her own life and her mother's life, and she declared she wanted to become a nurse. I want to be a nurse and support babies being born and women like Mom. She was still in middle school but soon started attending a cram school and quickly made it into a selective high school. From there, she relentlessly pursued a career in nursing through high school and college, her determination both heartening and bittersweet for me to watch. Jim felt the same way, and when our only daughter decided to live alone upon entering university, he strongly opposed it.
No way! What if she gets involved with some weird guy? There are suspicious people out there these days. That kind of person is always around. Jim, don't be such a helicopter parent. I hate the idea of her commuting to university by train.
The argument between me and Jane and my husband was truly stressful, but eventually, Jane started living on her own. The night Jane left, only I knew that Jim quietly cried over his drink. Jane spent her university breaks working part-time jobs and coming home. Her innate cheerfulness and positive attitude toward challenges surely guided her on her path to becoming a nurse. Remembering this, I also enjoy a drink with Jim.
That's true. Maybe somewhere known for its local craft beer would be nice?
That sounds good, but Jane complains when we drink too much. Jim says with a wry smile. Jane completed her training, passed the national licensing exam, and became a nurse. Then, unexpectedly, she announced she was getting married. The man's name was Tom, someone she met during her training. Tom had finished his medical training, proposed to Jane, and she accepted. It's been a while since I proposed, but I'm happy to meet you today. I want to build a happy home with her. Please allow us to get married." Jim and I were taken aback by the sudden news, but seeing his handsome and straightforward demeanor, I thought he seemed sincere. Predictably, Jim was visibly shocked but weakly consented to the marriage. "I see." Jim must have seen how well Jane and Tom suited each other, unable to object when he saw Jane smiling happily beside him. Though he didn't cry that night, he definitely shed tears at the wedding. Tom's family comes from a line of doctors, with his father also a doctor, still working at a nearby hospital. He was cheerful and kind towards Jane, but it seemed that Jane didn't quite get along with her Mael, Susan and Ciel, Anne. I overheard Jane on the phone once, saying,
"They accuse me of being after their money. Saying I became a nurse just because it pays well and such mean things. Why? Because I come from an ordinary family. It's really rude."
"But you and Tom are doing well, right?"
"Yeah. Sometimes we can't see each other because of my night shifts, but I'm still working too, so it's mutual. We both have the same time off next, so we're going to the beach."
Her voice brightened as she spoke, making me happy and reminding me of my own early days of marriage. Thinking this must be the happiest time for her, I said,
"Have fun,"
and hung up the phone. It's still fresh in my memory when Jane and Tom's daughter, Emma, was born. Named Emma, both Jim and I were delighted every time we received photos of our granddaughter.
"Jane's beauty has passed on to her. Her nose is just like Jane's."
Following Emma's birth, Jane became a full-time housewife, busy with household chores and childcare every day. However, not everything was joyful. Around Emma's second birthday, Tom's father passed away. Tom shed frustrated tears at the funeral. He was sick. It shocked me he kept it from me, but I think he must have been prepared. That day, the cold rain quietly soaked all the relatives gathered. After the funeral settled down, Susan proposed living together to Tom. "We have spare rooms, and it's lonely by myself. I also want to see my granddaughter Emma." Tom and Jane hadn't considered living with his parents. "We don't have to live together." Tom declined initially, but Susan brought up the idea every time they met. Living together would save on rent. Plus, it would bring you a bit closer to Jane's parents, right? Indeed, Susan's house was only a few minutes away by car from ours. Jane and Tom lived closer to Tom's hospital, away from both our houses. Thinking of having a second child and the possibility of getting some help with childcare, Jane and Tom accepted Susan's proposal to live together. When Jane told me this over the phone, I felt a bit anxious.
"But aren't you and Susan and not getting along so well? Are you sure it's going to be okay?"
And is living by herself in an apartment nearby, so it's just Susan at home, and it will be fine. I'll manage. With that, Jane started her life living with her in-laws. However, Anne, who was supposed to be living in an apartment, was always at the in-laws' house, not working, and just living day by day. "Jane, long time no see," greeted Anne, seemingly tipsy from drinking during the day. "And weren't you living on your own?" Jane asked, to which she laughed. "Is it so strange that I'm at my parents' house? I'm job hunting, so it's fine to be here for a bit." "Oh, Mary, can you make something to eat?" "Something simple is fine." However, there seemed to be no sign that she was actually looking for a job afterward. I was curious about how she was managing her apartment rent, but it appeared Susan was sending her money to cover it every month. Jane became anxious about the future, and her fears soon materialized. "Jane, as the wife in this house, you need to work hard. Start with cleaning, laundry. And of course, Cooking daily meals is a given for a housewife. That's how Susan's harassment began. When Jane cleaned or did the laundry, Susan would complain about every little thing, like not wringing the rag properly or hanging shirts incorrectly. "Jane, this is how you fold clothes," she would sometimes instruct. "I know how to do it. But your way is like this. It's completely different," Susan would insist, although Jane couldn't see any difference, so she let it go. Regarding cooking, Susan would complain about the seasoning being too strong. "I only eat food that's delicately seasoned and light," she claimed, even going so far as to throw away soup Jane had made. After living like this for a while, and also started harassing Jane, finding any opportunity to complain. "Jane, the bath isn't ready."
"It's still daytime. You're taking a bath now?" "I can take it whenever I want, can't I?" "You're so slow, Jane."
Such was the situation. That's the situation as I understood it, from Jane's phone calls and messages, but gradually, she complained less, and I thought maybe she was getting used to living with her in-laws. However, suddenly, Jane's communications stopped. She used to call once or twice a month, but then there was nothing. I tried calling several times, but often couldn't get through. When I finally did, Jane's voice sounded forcedly cheerful.
"I'm fine. Don't worry,"
she said. It made me even more worried, but I didn't want to interfere too much, so I didn't press further. Occasionally, I still received some contact from her.
"Why don't you come back here for a bit? I'll talk to Susan. Come back with Emma."
Jane would decline with a tired but cheerful laugh. Issues with in-laws happen in every family, right? I'm dealing with it, so don't worry.
"Jane, are you really okay? Your voice sounds hoarse."
"Oh, just a little cold." Her awkward response made me feel uneasy. "I should go. I need to prepare dinner." Jane hurriedly ended the call. After that, I tried contacting her several times, but I got no response from Jane, nor did my messages got read. One night, while having a drink with Jim, I brought up that Jane had been acting strangely lately. Maybe it's just a coincidence? Wasn't she just sick with a cold?
I wonder if it really was a cold. She always said colds hit her in the nose, but I didn't hear her sniffling at all.
Then we have no choice but to go directly to Susan's house and check on her ourselves. That weekend, Jim and I actually visited Susan's house. When we rang the doorbell, Jane came out to greet us, and we were happy to see her again after several months. Her face, though, seemed thinner than before, and her smile quickly turned to darkness. When Susan and appeared behind her.
"What is this? Showing up unannounced.
Don't you have any common sense?" Poor Jane, raised by such people. And said with a laugh, but Susan, without reprimanding her, was desperate to get us off the property.
"Please leave. I'll call the police for trespassing if you don't."
Susan, furiously trying to shoo us away with a broom, was visibly angry. Despite being chased off, Jim and I returned to our car, feeling that something was wrong.
Was Jane always that thin? She used to complain about gaining a little weight.
Is she not being fed properly? Could it be abuse?
Is that even possible?
We went to the police to discuss our concerns, but were told that without seeing Jane or witnessing abuse, they couldn't do anything.
It'll be too late if we wait until something happens.
I insisted, but Jim stopped me, and we went home for the day. Half a year passed in this state when one day, as I was relaxing in the living room, my mobile phone rang with a call from Jane. I hurried to answer it.
"Jane? Hello. Can you hear me? What happened, not contacting me for half a year?"
Mom." Jane's voice was a weak groan. "Help me. After saying just that in a weakened voice, I heard something fall.
What? Jane? Jane? Where are you now? At Susan's house?
I'm so starving, I can't take it anymore. I want to see Tom and Emma. Mom and Dad. I barely made out her choppy voice. She must have dropped the phone, and her voice faded away. As I was getting agitated, Jim, who had been working from home, came down from the second floor. What's wrong? A call from Jane?
Jim! Jane is in danger!
Jim immediately grabbed his car keys and wallet, and I hurried into the car while keeping the line open.
Jane, wait! We're coming now!
Forgetting to turn on the car's heater in the slight chill, we rushed over. When we rang Susan's house's doorbell, Susan came out and was startled to see us.
You two again!
Expecting to be turned away again, we entered the house before Susan could finish speaking. Who is it? One night, slightly tipsy and blocked our way, but Jim and I pushed past her and proceeded inside without hesitation.
Jane! Where are you, Jane? You're here, right? And Emma? We have to take Emma back too. Emma?
Susan and followed us, but we didn't care.
What's the meaning of this? Stop it, enough.
While I was calling for Emma, she noticed the commotion and came out. I'm here.
Good. Where's Mom? Do you know where she is?
Over there. Emma led us with her small steps to Jane's room. Along the way, Mom looking forward to seeing Grandma and Grandpa, Emma said. Puzzled, we followed her and arrived in front of a locked storage room. It was a simple lock added afterward, and Jim and I broke in.
Jane!
I screamed. Jane was lying weakly inside, her cheeks hollow, her limbs thin, clearly not having eaten for days. Jane couldn't respond, only occasionally moaning weakly.
I'm calling for an ambulance.
You're overreacting. I attended to Jane while Jim called the police and ambulance. After the call, Jim confronted Susan.
Why would you do this?
The answer came not from Susan or Anne, but from Emma standing nearby. It's discipline, she said.
Discipline? This isn't discipline.
Soon the ambulance arrived, and Jim and I explained to the paramedics that Jane was too weak to speak, had been left in the storage, and likely hadn't eaten properly. Sensing the severity from Jane's frail condition, a paramedic said, Understood. We'll transport her to the hospital immediately, and asked me to accompany them.
Wait! Her husband is a doctor. He works at...
I mentioned the hospital name, asking if they could take her there. The paramedics contacted the hospital, and fortunately, they agreed to accept her, so the ambulance quickly set off. Siren blaring towards the hospital. Arriving at the hospital, Tom, having been informed of the emergency admission, was waiting, and I confronted him in a near frenzy.
What have you done?
Confused, Tom was approached by nurses trying to separate us. Amidst the commotion, with people watching, I didn't hold back in telling Tom about Jane's condition.
I will never forgive this. Please wait. This is the first time I'm hearing of this. I thought she seemed a bit off lately, but she always laughed it off, saying she was fine.
Tom often stayed away from home overnight due to night shifts and helping at associated hospitals, so he rarely saw Jane and had left her care entirely to Susan and Anne. Eventually, Jane had to be hospitalized for a while. Tom, angry at himself for not noticing and at Susan and Anne for their actions, informed Jane's doctor of the seriousness of the situation and decided to call the police. The next day, when Jim visited Jane's hospital room, she was able to speak, though she looked painfully frail with an 4 drip. regretting not taking her out of that house sooner and apologizing for not noticing her situation. We listened as Jane recounted everything. It started with verbal abuse and escalated to taking away her mobile phone and computer, becoming increasingly malicious. Yet Jane, with her inherent brightness and positivity, tried to endure, smiling at Tom whenever he came home late or after a long absence. However, this seemed to irritate Susan and Anne, whose harassment escalated when Tom was frequently away at night shifts or training sessions. Jane didn't seek Tom's help because Susan had threatened her not to tell.
If I said anything, they'd bully Emma.
Indeed, there were instances where Emma was pinched on the cheek or deliberately not given food. Jane had reportedly pleaded,
I'll endure it, so please don't hurt Emma,
asking them not to lay a hand on Emma. For 6 months, Jane and Emma were separated, with Jane only receiving food and water once a day and kept in a storage room otherwise. Jane attempted to escape once but was caught by Anne at the entrance and severely beaten, making further escape attempts impossible. Fortunately, she had managed to keep an old mobile phone and charger hidden, which was not taken from her. Jane documented everything that happened, including daily abuses, in videos and messages at night.
Where is it? Under the bed in the storage room where I was.
Based on this information, the police later recovered the evidence. The police, using this evidence, arrested Susan and Anne for imprisoning Jane over a long period. This incident caused Jim to lose trust in Tom, and for the time being, Emma would stay with Jim and me.
We can't let Emma suffer the same fate as Jane. We'll be watching you closely from now on. Yes. I'm sorry. I won't make excuses for not realizing the terrible things my mother and were doing to Jane while I was away.
Tom deeply apologized. As for Jane, since her hospitalization, she gradually recovered both physically and mentally. Each visit to the hospital showed her cheeks becoming fuller, and she laughed happily about gaining weight on her upper arms. She was discharged about 3 months later, into the warm sunlight that felt a bit too bright. After her discharge, Jane returned to her parents' home, where she, Jim, Jane, and Emma began living together. We had assumed she would certainly divorce after such an ordeal, but after Emma had gone to bed one night, Jane said something unexpected. You know, I'm not thinking about getting a divorce. Jim and I were shocked. Perhaps seeing our confusion, Jane slowly explained. At first, I was fed up with Susan and thought about divorcing him. But Tom was always kind and warm. During her hospital stay, Tom visited her daily after work, apologizing on behalf of his mother and sister, and promised never to let such a thing happen again. I will protect you, he assured. He also worked to ensure Susan and Anne were punished by gathering evidence at home and getting his colleagues to write thorough medical reports. Tom talked about cutting ties with his family and said he'd follow any conditions my parents set until they could forgive him, Jane said.
Do you believe him?
I do. That's why I really want to live with Tom and Emma again. Jane looked directly into Jim's eyes as she spoke, her words and expression showing no doubt. However, Jim and I couldn't easily accept this and told Tom that we opposed the idea of Jane and Emma living with him for the time being, even after arranging a meeting to discuss it. Surprisingly, Tom accepted our stipulation without argument. I understand both Jane's and your feelings. I've done something unforgivable and will accept any punishment until I can live with Jane and Emma again. Later, Jim retired, and we moved to the countryside with Jane and Emma. Something we had talked about doing after retirement, but never expected to happen so soon.
Isn't this a bit hasty?
I asked Jim before moving, but he shook his head. I can't settle down knowing their house is nearby. Meanwhile, the young couple continued to persuade Jim to let them live as a family again. Desperate for approval, Tom heard from Jane about a closed clinic in our new town and immediately came to check it out. It was a small clinic, previously run by an elderly doctor specializing in internal medicine and pulmonology, retiring due to age. The clinic was conveniently located near a bus stop and had good access to the train station, with most facilities already in place. Tom, who had specialized in internal medicine, decided to leave his previous hospital, purchased the closed clinic, and successfully opened his own practice. At the clinic, Jane returned to work as a nurse, starting her days early and working reduced hours so she could be home by the evening. The clinic is so close to home that it's only a 5-minute drive away. On the clinic's days off, Tom comes over, and we spend time dining and playing with Emma, Jane, and me. Jim still keeps a stern eye on Tom, but lately, he's started to watch over him more gently. I hope for a reconciliation between Jim and them soon and showcase my cooking skills on weekends. "How's it going lately?" Jim asks gruffly, but his voice carries a hint of kindness.
"It's nice being with Jane and Emma. And being able to drink with Jim."
Don't get too comfortable. Jim and Tom have even started to enjoy a drink together in the evenings. "Thanks for taking care of my daughter this past month. I'll come pick her up tomorrow." "What are you talking about?" Sherry, my sister-in-law, who had been traveling for a month, seemed still to be at the airport, as I could hear the sound of boarding announcements through the phone. In contrast to my calm response, she began to panic.
"Wait, what? No, what are you talking about? She's there, right? I left Daisy in your condo's garage."
Daisy is her daughter, my niece. "I haven't seen her. What are you talking about?"
"Don't play dumb. I sent you a text, so you know."
"I haven't received any text."
"You're lying. I know you're lying. Don't play with me."
Sherry screamed over the phone, panicking.
"What are you going to do about it? I left Daisy with you. You're responsible if anything happens."
After hanging up once, Sherry tried calling Daisy's child safety phone, but not being able to reach her, she continued to panic. She called me back, even more frantic, so I suggested she might want to go home first.
"You're right. That's a good idea."
Upon her return home, she found her husband Leon, Daisy, and me, the three of us together. Sherry seemed to want to ask why the three of us were together.
"Sherry, I've just been hearing all about it from these two." "What?"
At Leon's words, she turned pale. "My name is Bonnie, and until a few years ago, I worked a regular office job. Upon turning 40, I became independent and started working as a freelance illustrator. With the increase in income, I now live alone in a condo. My work is primarily home-based, and I only leave the house for essential errands like going to the grocery store or meetings with clients. I'm not married, nor do I have a partner, but I'm satisfied with my life. Friends sometimes ask if I'm lonely, but I've never thought about it that way. I'm more fulfilled by my work and have no plans to look for a partner. I do worry about old age a little, but I think to myself, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it, to which I'm surprised at my own optimism. Today, after meeting a deadline for an illustration, I took a break at 3 p.m. and looked at the calendar. Then, I realized that my brother Leon's birthday was coming up soon. Leon, 5 years my senior, works in sales at a major publishing company and often goes on long business trips. Sometimes, he brings back souvenirs from his travels. Last month, he dropped by and brought some cookies as a souvenir, so I let him in, made some coffee, and we enjoyed the cookies together. I keep telling you, you don't need to bring anything for me. Buy more for Sherry and Daisy.
But I need to see your face from time to time. Don't want to find you laying on the floor.
Leon has always been like this, considerate or meddlesome, but it's one of his good traits. Sherry and Daisy are his wife and daughter, therefore my sister-in-law and niece. I haven't told Leon, but I find Sherry a bit difficult to get along with. She's very bright and always dresses fashionably, with her nails done and in the latest trends, giving off a very glamorous impression. It's not that I mind that, but she often looks down on me for being single. At a family gathering at Christmas, she laughed upon learning I had neither a partner nor a love interest. Hey, are you the type who thinks you can afford to wait because you're always young and beautiful? Don't you know about the marriage boat? I think marriage and romance vary by individual. It's not necessary to have a partner. She laughed again at my response. I couldn't tell if it was the alcohol or what, but she kept teasing me about the same thing, and it became tiring to deal with. When choosing a condo to live alone, being away from Leon's family was definitely a criterion. That's how much I was fed up with her. However, I got along well with my niece Daisy. She turned 10 this year and seems to go to school carrying a cute light blue backpack. I haven't seen her in it, but she told me about it when she came to visit.
Bonnie, you're so good at drawing.
Daisy, who had been watching me work on illustrations, was impressed and stared at the drawing on the computer screen. Wow, I wish I could draw too. Oh, want to try?
Really?
Yeah, there's still plenty of time before the deadline, so you can have a go. Daisy sat in front of the computer and excitedly started moving the pen. What she drew on the screen was her light blue backpack. She mentioned it was heavy because she also carries a tablet in it. Considering it's even heavier with a water bottle in the summer, I was really impressed by how strong she was despite her small size. According to Daisy, Sherry spends her days as a housewife, and when Leon is away on business trips, she does whatever she pleases. For dinner or lunch on days when school is out, they eat frozen meals or pizza delivery. I'm the one who always does the laundry, and Mom only does it once in a while.
Really?
Yeah, and she gets really mad when my shoes are muddy after PE.
Why? What does Mom do at home?
She's always on her phone or watching TV. Daisy tries not to upset her mom by staying in her room or going out to the park or the library. Hearing this makes me wonder about parenting, but it's tricky to know if it's my place to say anything. There was another time when the family gathered, and I saw Sherry scolding at quiet Daisy harshly. I think Daisy had spilled some tea, but I thought it wasn't something to get so mad about. It could easily be wiped up with paper towels. Mom is scary. She gets mad at everything I say, so I just keep quiet. Daisy's offhand remark about her mom as she was leaving, after drawing her light blue backpack, stuck with me like a splinter. I remembered that day was a sunny weekend, and Sherry had left Daisy with me because she was going on a day trip with her mom friends. I never imagined receiving a similar text on my mobile phone just a few days later. The autumn leaves in the nearby park had deepened, and it was getting to the point where you missed the warmth of the sun. That kind of coldness had arrived. When I returned to my condo after running a small errand, I saw the silhouette of a girl standing alone by the parking lot. She was wearing a light blue backpack, and I was surprised to recognize her face.
Daisy?
When I called out to her, her anxious eyes looked up at me. It was indeed Daisy.
What are you doing here all alone? And what's with the luggage?
Next to her was a small carry-on case, making it look as though she had run away from home. Mom said to go to your house. Seeing my confusion, Daisy gestured towards my bag, saying, on the mobile phone. Perhaps there was a text on my mobile phone. I hurriedly took out my phone from my bag, and indeed, there was a text from Sherry, albeit recently. Bonnie, sorry for the sudden request. I'm going on a trip with a friend for a month starting today. Please take care of my daughter. After reading it, an inarticulate exclamation escaped my lips, but I quickly closed my mouth. Of course, it was out of confusion, but considering Daisy was probably just as bewildered, we decided to go inside. Once inside, Daisy's cheeks were as red as apples, and her hands were very cold. I made her some hot cocoa to warm up a bit and offered her some snacks while listening to her story. Up until a short while ago, Daisy had been drawing in her notebook in her room. Sherry entered Daisy's room without knocking, handed her a carry-on case, and said, Daisy, get ready, we're going to Bonnie's house. Mom won't be home for a month, so bring your backpack, okay? Understood? Okay. Thus, Daisy quickly packed her notebook, pencil case, textbooks, and tablet into her backpack. During this time, Sherry was on the phone, seeming quite restless.
Really? That's great. Don't tell me, are you drinking already? It's too early.
Sherry's voice was high-pitched and filled the house. Hearing her mother's unusual laughter from downstairs, Daisy covered her ears. After the phone call ended, Sherry's voice returned to normal, and then Daisy was left at that place with her luggage. When Daisy got out of the car, Sherry explained to her, "Be good, I'm leaving you with Bonnie for a month." She was told to wait here and had been waiting under the cold sky. Despite the sunlight, it was quite a cold season. Thinking about what would have happened if Daisy had caught a cold made me feel a rising anger at the situation.
But does Dad know about this?
I don't think so. Mom doesn't seem to contact Dad much. She told me so as she munched on chocolate cookies. While I thought how cute she looked with cookie crumbs on her cheeks, I felt it was wrong not to inform Leon and decided to call him later. "Bonnie, I don't want to be with Mom anymore." Suddenly, Daisy said this while staring at the rim of her juice glass. The girl who had been happily eating cookies now had a troubled look, far too mature for her age. "Why?" "Because Mom gets angry easily, and she throws things at me, like the trash can. I hate it."
The trash can?
"I haven't done anything wrong. She says I'm in the way, tells me to get lost, and throws things. My teachers at school won't believe me either. I can't stand it." Tears were streaming down her face. It must have been very hard for her, as she continued to cry, and I spent the time soothing her back and offering tissues until she calmed down. Clearly, what was happening to her was not normal. Convinced of this, I decided to call Leon to see if he could come back and help. Stepping away for a bit where Daisy couldn't see, I pondered how to explain the situation to him, then an idea came to me. "All right, this might work." I murmured softly and dialed Leon's number.
"What? Daisy? Yeah, what did you say?"
Leon seemed quite shaken as he listened to the story, his voice trembling slightly. At first, he joked, saying it must be a prank, not funny, but as I continued, he believed me and listened seriously. When I shared my idea for a plan I had come up with, Leon agreed to it, saying he would take time off work to help. "All right then, please take care of it. Don't worry, Daisy is in good hands." I hung up, then quietly deleted the text from Sherry from my mobile phone. Looking towards the living room, I wondered if Daisy had calmed down and quietly went back. I should splurge a bit and treat her to something delicious tonight. With that in mind, I slowly returned. The school Daisy attends is a bit far from here, but I explained the situation to the school and arranged for her to take the bus. This way, carrying her heavy backpack, including her tablet, would be a bit easier. Planning to bill Leon for the bus fare later, I continued my work from home during the day. Daisy doesn't have any extracurricular activities, so she comes home right after school to do her homework. "Bonnie, can you check my homework?" I was surprised. Isn't that what teachers are for? But according to Daisy, it was different. "All my classmates have their moms check. I always did it myself." Realizing Sherry had always put herself first, I picked up a red pen. After checking her homework, it was time to prepare dinner. When I stood in the kitchen, Daisy followed, saying with her eyes, "I want to help. Today we're making meatloaf, so could you start by peeling the onions?"
"Sure."
Daisy was surprisingly quick at peeling onions, and she efficiently followed directions to help cook. I wondered where she learned to cook so well, but there was no time to ask as the meal was ready before I knew it. As these days repeated, we enjoyed our time together, and before we knew it, a month had passed. Looking at the calendar, I anticipated Sherry's call, and sure enough, it came.
"Bonnie, thanks for taking care of my daughter this past month. I'll come to pick her up tomorrow."
"What are you talking about?" I replied calmly. Sherry, who had been traveling for a month, seemed still to be at the airport, as I could hear boarding announcements through the phone.
"Wait, what? No, what are you talking about? She's there, right? I left Daisy in your condo's garage."
"I haven't seen her. What are you talking about?"
"Don't play dumb. I sent you a text, so you know.
I haven't received any text. Are you sure you're not mistaken?
You're lying. I know you're lying. Don't play with me.
Sherry, seemingly panicked, screamed over the phone.
What are you going to do about it? I left Daisy with you. You're responsible if anything happens. I'll call Daisy to see what's up.
With a sharp tone, she angrily hung up the phone. After a while, another call came in, and Sherry was yelling again. Sherry tried calling Daisy's child safety phone, but not being able to reach her, she continued to panic.
Sherry, why don't you go home and calm down first? That's true. You're right. I'll go home now.
After that, there was a forgotten hang-up, and voices arguing could be heard, Sherry and presumably a man, but it was too far to make out clearly. The room returned to silence, ominously quiet as if before a storm. When Sherry finally came home, her footsteps thundered down the hall. Entering the living room, her face went from a demonic frenzy to a pale shock. It was because she found all three of us in the living room, Leon, Daisy, and me. Sherry's mouth moved as if to ask why the three of us were together, but no sound came out.
Sherry, I've heard everything from these two. And about that call earlier. What?
I put the phone on speaker so we could all hear. I thought it would make it easier to discuss what comes next. By the way, Daisy's child safety phone was turned off, so it was natural that Sherry couldn't reach her.
How could you do this? That's my line. I said I didn't know earlier, but we've been taking care of Daisy for a month. How could you just leave her at someone's house and go off on a trip suddenly? I sent a text about it. That's not the point.
Leon carefully chose his words and spoke calmly.
Let's all calm down. Daisy is here too. Sherry, it's true you left Daisy and went on a trip by yourself. Your attire and luggage look like you've just returned.
Sherry was dressed in a warm coat and stylish outdoor clothes. With lots of luggage, perhaps from shopping for souvenirs and clothes, her carry-on looked full. Without denying, Sherry started making excuses.
Yes, I went on a trip. I just wanted a break from being a housewife. The laundry, cooking, it's all the same every day. I was stressed. It's not too much to ask to go out with friends. Is this the friend you're talking about in these emails?
I presented several sheets of paper. They contained email exchanges between Sherry and what appeared to be her affair partner, discussing plans for their trip. Dating back to last spring, and even on the day I took care of Daisy for one day. The supposed day trip with mom friends was a lie. Sherry covered her mouth as if realizing her mistake. Actually, a few hours before Sherry arrived, at Daisy's request, I had looked through Sherry's computer and found these emails in her mailbox. Daisy had noticed her mom frequently texting someone not her dad and suspected the affair. Her suspicion turned to certainty when she saw texts from an unknown man on her mom's phone while she slept. Also, when Sherry was on the phone, she could occasionally hear the other person's voice, but it wasn't her dad's voice. I heard from Daisy 6 months ago that Sherry was having an affair. I had been skeptical until Sherry suddenly announced her trip a month ago, but after checking the computer, I realized Daisy's intuition was right. You could see Leon was visibly shaken.
What have you done? I trusted you, and you leave Daisy with Bonnie to go on a trip for an affair?
Leon confronted Sherry with a trembling fist.
It's a misunderstanding. I was forced to go on that trip by him. Forced? You left your family for a month for that? Come up with a better excuse. I was threatened. Believe me, Daisy, you believe me, right?
Daisy, suddenly addressed, responded calmly and plainly.
Mom, you were so happy on the phone before you left. And you made me do all the cooking and cleaning while you just slept and lazed around.
Daisy glared with her lips pursed.
And you tell me not to stay up late, but you'd go out at night and come back in the morning to sleep on the floor. Everything you said was inconsistent.
Hearing this, Leon pressed further.
Going out at night? You were partying? It's not like that. Daisy, stop talking.
I quickly showed Leon the photo on my mobile phone. It was a photo captured of Sherry, who was dressed up and heading out late at night. Several months ago, I got a call from Daisy, and since I happened to be nearby, I took this photo, but I was surprised too. Where were you trying to go at that late an hour, Sherry?
Oh,
She was confronted with the photo, and perhaps realizing she could no longer make excuses, slumped down right there.
I can't believe it. I can no longer entrust Daisy to you. Let's get divorced. I'll demand alimony. From now on, you're free to be with that other man.
Leon said so with his shoulders drooping and then turned his back on Sherry.
What? A divorce? You're kidding, right? Why? Don't you feel sorry for Daisy not having her mom around? What about you, Daisy? Come on, help Mom out. No, absolutely not. Bonnie feels more like a mom.
I felt very embarrassed as an adult to see Sherry cry to her own child, but Daisy brushed her mom off. While I was taking care of Daisy, I made time for her as much as possible, discussing school, hobbies, future dreams, and various other topics. Of course, cooking together was one of those things.
Sherry, don't worry. I'll make sure Daisy is happy.
I said with a smile, and Sherry hung her head dejectedly, saying nothing more. 6 months later, her divorce from Leon was finalized, and custody went to Leon. Sherry, dragged by her parents, went back to her hometown. The man she had an affair with, whom she met on the internet, disappeared as soon as he found out about the divorce, and communication was cut off. By the time she realized she was just played, it was too late, leaving her with a hefty alimony and child support bill. Her savings were far from enough, and she managed to make the payments by having her parents bear more than half the burden. However, that led to stricter surveillance from her parents, and she could no longer go out late at night. Moreover, the rumor that she got divorced and came back home without her daughter spread throughout the neighborhood, and she was met with cold stares when walking outside during the day, so she rarely left the house. Still, she couldn't remain unemployed forever, so she would have to re-enter society at some point, but what happened after that is unknown to me, Leon, nor Daisy. Leon and Daisy have moved out of their original home to rent it to someone else and are now living on a different floor of the condominium where I live. They plan to use the rental income for loan repayments and savings for Daisy. I've started visiting them almost every day. Leon, who was often away on business trips and couldn't be near Daisy, regretted not being able to pay more attention to his family and focusing too much on work, decided to change jobs. Changing jobs in his 40s was supposed to be a challenge, but his sales performance was excellent, and his communication skills were high, so it was not surprising that he could have held a position of some responsibility. Therefore, his job search did not drag on too long, and 6 months, he received job offers from 2 or 3 companies and starting work at one of them. I was surprised that Leon had such abilities, but what surprised me more was that he preferred outside sales at his previous company and gently declined promotion offers. It wouldn't be interesting to stay on the same company floor all the time. For that reason? But the new job is fully remote, right?
Yes, but talking with various people is interesting in its own way. Most importantly, being with Daisy is the best.
Daisy is still going to school with her light blue backpack. Moving changed her school district, requiring Daisy to transfer schools. Though it must have been sad to say goodbye to her friends and teachers, Daisy seemed surprisingly calm, even enjoying her new school life. Daisy, have you gotten used to your new school? I asked while making dinner together, and Daisy smiled.
Yeah, I made a friend in the class next door.
Already? That was fast. Daisy nodded shyly.
Yeah, next time, I'm going to make meatloaf at their house.
That sounds fun.
Yup.
Seeing her smile like a blooming flower made me smile too. Her dream is to open a restaurant. Thinking it's solid for a 10-year-old to have such a dream, Daisy shared her reason.
That friend, like me, doesn't have a mom who cooks, so she cooks herself. She said she wants to cook for people who don't have someone to cook for them, like us. Is that so? I hope I can be like that too. So, I'm practicing making meatloaf.
Her innocent laughter made me feel a complex emotion for a moment, but I quickly smiled back.
That's great, Daisy. Your meatloaf is delicious. I want many people to taste it. Thanks.
Seeing Daisy looking forward with such earnestness made her seem incredibly strong and shining. Her dream will not end in fantasy or delusion. I'm looking forward to the day when Daisy grows up and opens her restaurant.